Anyway, yeah, hitting live. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear us and see us. Welcome to our special Surface 10-year anniversary stream where we're going to share our opinions on every Surface product that's hit the market to date, not including the Surface table. I know I've seen a few comments online already from people going, excuse me, it's not actually the 10-year anniversary because the Surface table came out in 2008. I don't care. We're not talking about the Surface table. We're talking
Consumer
about
products.
exactly the cool Surface products, not the retail table. With me is Daniel Rubino, as always, and I'm also joined by Jez Corden. Hello, Jez.
Hello. How's it going, friends?
We're good. You sound ill.
I am ill, but I'm doing my best. Doing my best.
Good. All right, so I guess we could probably just dive straight into this. We have a tier list here. This is, if you've never seen this before, this is essentially a website where you can go and create your own tier lists, and there's loads of them for all kinds of different topics. I've thrown one together here for all of the Surface products. We're not going to include Surface Hub because none of us really use Surface Hub, so it's hard for us to judge them. But all of the sort of laptops and sort of consumer grade PCs are here. So I guess we'll go chronologically if that's all right with everybody.
Sounds good to me.
Cool. So let's start with the Surface RT, the one that started at all June 2012, was announced June 18th, 2012. And this was the product that Microsoft was so proud to show off to the world. It was the sort of beginning of this new era with Windows 8, or Windows RT, I guess, with the Surface RT. And it was supposed to kickstart this sort of revolution in the PC space. Now, as we all know, when the Surface RT launched, it didn't launch in a great state. They made too many of them. I think it was $1 billion write-down almost, not even a year after launch. And when it hit reviewers, it was received kind of poorly, if you remember rightly. It was a poor laptop. It was slow. It had a sort of low-resolution screen. The lappability of it, the Surface sort of created the term lappability. That wasn't great either. What are your guys' thoughts on this, and where do you think it goes? We should explain the list here. We have S for the top tier, then we have A, B, C, and D. So that's our rankings for this. There's 5 rankings. B is sort of middle of the line, S is the best, D is the worst.
It's interesting, right? Because when the Surface RT came out, I wasn't a blogger. I wasn't working in Windows Central. I was just I was dabbling, and I was, starting to get into the Microsoft ecosystem and Windows Phone and all that kind of stuff. And I saw this, I read about the Surface RT on Windows Central back when I was a fan of Windows Central. And I said to because my boss, my company was a non-profit where I used to work. So getting new PCs in was really expensive. But in the UK, Microsoft had this great deal for Surface RT for educational institutes. You could get a Surface RT for 99 quid if you bought them in bulk. So because I wanted to use one and try one out, I convinced my boss that these are the next supercomputer for education. And then we ended up with like 20 of these Surface RTs. And I was like, yeah, I get to play with one now. They were really good though for the school. They set up like a special computer room which had just Surface RTs in it, and this is before like iPads and stuff were prevalent in schools, or at least in where I live, and it was before Chromebooks were a thing. And we had all these Surface RTs and hooked them up to Windows Server, like a very old, I think it's Windows Server 2003 or something like that. Very old with Active Domain, Windows Server, Active Directory, sorry. And it all just worked, all the printers worked through it. And, that's the great thing about Windows backwards compatibility. But my boss loved it so much that he was running his entire segment of the business from Surface RT for years.
Really?
He didn't. Yeah, really. He didn't need anything more than Excel and email, and so and he used to take it everywhere and he used to show it off to people. And at the time, people were like, "Oh, is that an iPad? Is that an iPad?" And it's like, no, it's a Surface. It's a full PC. Look, I can casually open Outlook and Excel on this thing. It wasn't even a thing on iPad back then, really. So, I got fond memories of that device, so I'd rank it highly.
Yeah, so do I, Dan.
It's a bit dodgy.
Dan, what are your thoughts on the Surface RT?
So I actually stayed in line in New York City to get one of these. And Panos Panay was actually at the store and signing them too. And I have photos for this. I've posted it before. Um, and like, yeah, it was a pretty memorable event for sure. And the reason I got the RT was simply because I couldn't afford the Pro. So, um, so the RT one was definitely lower cost, more affordable. I had no problem with it just because, again, um, in terms of what my workload was at the time, what I wanted it to use it for was pretty casual stuff. Uh, and I was obviously on board with Windows Phone, and this had like a UI that kind of reminded me of it. I didn't love everything about it. Obviously, when you would go to the desktop, it was kind of weird, because it looked like real Windows, but then you couldn't really do anything with it. So that was definitely strange. But I like it. I don't remember that much about using it. But I still have one. It's downstairs in a box. But it was definitely, I think, an interesting device. And I think your thoughts and feelings that really came down to, are you a light user who just did basic productivity, email, Office, and were okay with store apps? Or did you, were you a pro user?
Yeah.
And the RT version had the benefit of the better battery life.
It did.
I don't think I forgot if you even had fans.
Nope, it's
totally
wasn't fanless. It's an ARM device.
Yeah.
So.
Right. So it was just like, so you had all those benefits which were so new and unique to a Windows experience. Where the Pro version, yeah, it had a real processor, and you had a real fan, and you had a really, not great battery life with it. And it was a lot more expensive.
Yeah, I've actually got mine. Oh, I've got an echo. Give me one second. I forgot to turn that off. There we go. Yeah, I've got mine right here. This is my Surface RT from... I don't know if I bought it I don't think I did buy it at launch. I think I got this maybe 6 months later. But I remember at the time, as you mentioned, Dan, this design was unlike anything else in the PC market. Yes, there was the iPad, but for a full Windows PC, a device this thin with no vents and no fans hadn't really been seen before. It was insane, and the build quality of the first Surface, I think, to this day, holds up tremendously well. I think the kickstand on the first Surface is the best because it's got one position, but that's because they were able to design it and sort of make it super sturdy. When they introduced the second and third and then eventually the ultimate or the unlimited hinge, it sort of I feel like it got a bit flimsier, but this first gen one is like, it's proper, and I really do like it. But the biggest problem with the Surface RT, of course, was the sort of, I wouldn't call it a low-end CPU, but it was certainly a slow CPU. It was an NVIDIA Tegra 3. It had 2 gigs of RAM and either 32 or 64 gigs of storage. So it was an expensive device, but it wasn't the most powerful device. And Windows RT, obviously, the biggest limitation around Windows RT was that it was limited to Microsoft or Windows Store apps at the time, and they had to be compiled for ARM. You couldn't run. There was no emulation layer for existing Windows desktop apps. It was everything through the store, just like an iPad. And that, I think, is ultimately what killed the Surface RTs, because there was just no app ecosystem, and that's a real shame. So where do we think it comes on the tier list here? So we have S, A, B, C, and D. It started it all right, but I don't think it's the best Surface, because there were a lot of problems with this one, right? Especially around lappability and all of that stuff. There was a lot of ergonomic issues with the first Surface that they do later sort of get around and solve, but with the first one, they certainly didn't.
I'm going to give it a B.
B?
Yeah, just because, like I said, it was the first ARM device. It was the first fanless device. It was a Windows 8 experience. The build quality was fantastic. It also had that keyboard that they later got rid of, that didn't have physically moving keys, the touch type.
Yeah.
And that was unique. So everything about it was completely new and different. And for that reason, it's a B. Now, people are going to disagree with me. Again, it'll depend on, were you a pro user at the time? Because I knew a lot of developers, were using these devices where the Pro just made much more sense. So that's going to really depend on your happiness. But for, I think, all of us here, we're pretty casual users. The RT was definitely the first really kind of iPad competitor for us who enjoyed Windows. I thought that was kind of unique.
What about you, Jez? What do you think?
I like Dan's B.
Yeah.
I do like the B.
Yeah, I think I agree with B.
Because it is, purely because it was the first, and, they could have just thrown it away and just been like, oh, this whole Surface thing doesn't work.
Yeah.
But obviously now it's a multi-billion-dollar business. So
Yeah.
sort of like Surface RT was like the canary going down into the mine. Can we really take on iPad here with full-blown Windows? You know, with all the bulk that Windows often has. And even though Surface RT or Windows RT was like slimmed down, it still had a lot of that sort of legacy aspects in Windows that didn't necessarily work on an ARM machine. But I think B's sounded solid.
Yeah.
And also I need to agree with Dan or it fire me.
Yeah.
So the Surface RT was the first to launch. It launched in October 2012. The Surface Pro came a few months after. I think it was January 2013. Here's what that looked like. It was a thicker, heavier Surface RT, essentially. This one had an Intel Core i5, I think it was, or maybe it was an i3. Intel Core i5, third generation Intel processor, I think it was. 4 gigabytes of RAM, and I think you can get it up to 8 gigs of RAM. 128 gig SSD on the inside. It had a much better screen. It had a 1080p display instead of the 1366 by 768 on the Surface RT. And it also supported pen. This was the first Surface to support pen. The Surface RT didn't, surprisingly. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. Like I said, it is thicker. It has a fan. Same kickstand with one position only. So it had all the same lapability problems as the Surface RT. I think this is worse than the Surface RT, which may be a hot take.
That is a hot take.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. You know, I would give it a C because of that, because it was a PC and it did everything you wanted, but the battery life was pretty poor on it. It was pretty really poor. It was very expensive for what it was. It did push boundaries in terms of design, so you know, it gets credit for that. But you know, we kind of know where this is leading to in terms of where this device actually kind of hit its stride. And this wasn't it. It was a cool first experience. I know a lot of people who continued to use the Pro 1 and Pro 2 for many years. So there are definitely a lot of people who are happy with it. So it doesn't deserve less than a C for certain. But they had a lot of challenges with it. And yeah, I don't know. I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think C, because as you mentioned, the battery life was terrible. But in addition to that, there was also... It overheated a lot, right? I remember lots of people talking about how this Surface Pro would always throttle, and it just wasn't even though it's way thicker than the Surface RT, the thin form factor of the Surface Pro just wasn't enough to sort of keep that Intel processor cool. And as a result, it was just a sort of worse experience. Yes, the Surface RT was locked down from a software perspective, but I think the hardware design and just it's clear that the Surface RT's vision was the sort of ultimate goal, and then the Surface Pro was the right, let's make a thicker one for the Intel chip. And as a result, I think the RT certainly deserves to be a little bit higher. Where is the Pro? There it is. So C, do you agree with that, Jez? Where would you say it comes?
No.
No?
I give it a B.
A B.
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
It's because I was using, like, my boss was using Surface RT, right? And I was saying, because I was the IT guy at my company, but also I was just the guy who did anything to do with computers. So we also had a company website, we had a social media presence, so I handled all of this. And I was like to my boss, I was like, well, if I'm going to be doing web design stuff and web development, I need a full-blown Intel computer, and there's a more expensive version of the RT. So I was like angling to get the Surface Pro, and my boss was running the whole business of Surface RT because he only needed Excel and email, really. I was doing my job fully from the Surface Pro. So I built my first blog and the company websites, and I built all of that on the Surface Pro one. Obviously, I didn't use it very much when it unplugged because the battery life was pretty shocking. But I was kind of like, I was the ideal user for this kind of product, right?
Right.
I didn't need something so powerful that could run games or 3D stuff or video editing. I just needed something that could run sort of the next level up, like Dreamweaver and Photoshop maybe to some degree. So it was kind of the ideal device for my lifestyle at the time, because also our company also had like a restaurant downstairs. We had my company was really weird. We ran in the same building. We had a school, we had office space to rent out, and also a restaurant that we ran. like a cafe sort of thing. So I used to just like, I'd be like, I'm gonna have a burger and work and take, fold it up and take it downstairs and do the kickstand thing and pop it out on the desk, and everyone would turn their heads like, what the hell is that device? Like the commercials. So I was like the kind of ideal person to have one of these devices. So for me, I'd give it a B as well, because obviously it was again a canary down the mine, and it did have its problems and stuff, but I really loved it. I really, really loved it. I've got like it was like the first Surface I really fell in love with, more so than the RT, because I like the RT, but it was like I can't use this for anything really.
Yeah.
So Surface Pro really gave me more of a vision of what Surface could be than I think even the RT did. So for me, it's a B.
Yeah, I'm still leaning on C only because it was thicker, it was hotter, it was heavier. It just wasn't as portable from a pure design hardware perspective. It was the sort of lesser,
a lot of compromise.
Yeah, it was the compromise. It was the ugly brother of the two. And for me, that's why it's a C, because I am shallow. I do form over function for me, and yeah, so that's why it's a C grade for me. And I think, Dan, unless you have any thoughts on changing your rank.
No, that's fine.
No, yeah, so C grade it is. Up next is the Surface 2, the Surface Rt2, or it was just known as Surface 2 when it launched. So a couple things with the Surface 2. They went ahead and sort of fixed a lot of the initial teething issues that the Surface RT had. It had a better high-resolution 1080p display, which looked so much better with Windows 8. They changed the color of it from black to platinum, which is kind of what they still use to this day. It had 2 positions on the kickstand, went from one position there to the second one, and what Microsoft said at the time was that this improves lappability twofold, and surprisingly it did. The problem with the first Surface RT was that because the position of the kickstand's angle was so was so shallow, it felt top heavy on your lap. With the second position, that weight was sort of shifted back a bit, so it actually sat better on your legs. It still wasn't perfect, but it was a sort of stepping stone towards them solving that problem with the Pro 3 onwards. But yeah, the Surface Rt2, it launched with, give me a sec to pull it up, it launched with an NVIDIA Tegra 4, which was a much better version of the NVIDIA Tegra 3. Performance-wise, it was perfectly fine at this point. And it was available with 2 gigs of RAM still, 32 gig or 64 gig of internal storage. And yeah, that's what it was. Launched with Windows RT 8.1, which was still locked down to the Microsoft Store. It was, you couldn't run third-party applications, unfortunately, so it still had that problem going for it. But what are your guys' thoughts on the second-gen Surface RT?
Dan can go first.
Okay, fine. This one's also B for me, just because this is starting to bring in some of the classic Surface design elements, specifically the platinum design, right? That colorway just became really awesome. The 2-way kickstand was a huge improvement. The display resolution increasing was great. It didn't fix the problem if you still didn't like RT.
Right.
So again, your view of this ranking is really going to depend on your thoughts of RT at the time. If you absolutely hated it, then you're going to disagree with this. But if you're okay with it and we're looking for really that iPad, and I think part of this also depends if you used Windows Phone at the time, because if you used Windows Phone, this idea of like your apps were the same, and if you're okay with the apps on your phone, you just would kind of have them on a bigger display. That was the goal there. Then like that made more sense to you, and that was okay. Whereas like if you had a desktop computer or a bigger laptop or something, so that's where I'm going to land with Surface 2.
Jez?
I think I got a Surface 2 for my girlfriend because like I was really into the Microsoft stuff at this point. I'd like gone from Surface RT to Surface Pro, and I had Windows Phone. I was like, and I was my girlfriend was like, she was using like one of those LG phones with the QWERTY keyboard. Do you remember those? The slide out like Android 1.6 or something. And I was like, I've got to upgrade. Like my girlfriend's family, they also had like ADSL 0.1, 0.5 megabyte internet and stuff. And I was like, I've got to upgrade my entire girlfriend's family's tech to like the next to modernity. So I got her a Surface Rt2, I think. Surface 2, I suppose it's called. And I didn't use it that much myself, but she really loved it. and stuff. So I'd probably give that maybe I give it a C, because unlike the Surface RT, the first one, which was like the canary in the mine. I've used that metaphor 3 times now. I'm keeping track. Surface 2, like, it was sort of iterative for me.
Yeah,
but it definitely was, and I think that's a really good point, because unlike other Surfaces, the turnaround between Surface Gen 1 and Gen 2 was exactly a year.
Yeah.
And that's rapid. They really, I think that almost left a sour taste in some people's mouths, because that's a short time, especially when you consider launching in foreign countries or countries outside of the U.S. That wasn't much time. Yeah, and so that was unique. Most Surfaces later on went to a 16-month or later timescale.
It's almost like the Surface 2 is what should have been the first one they launched, maybe, but they just sort of like, oh shit, we're not allowed to swear, sorry Zach. But they were like, oh no, we've got $1 billion worth of Surface RT stock, we've got to sell it,
Yeah,
almost like, it's kind of like, how they cancelled Andromeda to make the Duo,
right?
It's almost like maybe they should have cancelled the first Surface to make the Surface 2, but I don't know. So I'll give it a C, because it was iterative. And
I think I agree with you, Jez. It does a lot to improve on the sort of original vision for the Surface RT, but the fundamental issue of the platform still not being where it would need to be for this to be successful, for me, means it still wasn't. It was not worth buying even more come 2013, let alone 2012. So yeah, I think C tier is for the Surface 2 makes sense. But it's hard, right? Because it is technically a better product, so I don't know. But I think we're gonna go with C for now. What came after that? The Surface Pro 2, right? So the Surface Pro 2 launched like 9 months after the Surface Pro, which, well, I remember being a big problem for a lot of people. But yeah, the Surface Pro 2 came out. I don't actually have this one, so I can't show it to you on camera. The Surface Pro 2 launched in October 2013. It had an Intel Core i5-4300U or an i5-4200U. Oh, okay, so I can explain that. They actually changed the CPU midway through its life cycle, and that also annoyed people, because whoever bought the older processor was technically getting shafted. They didn't increase the price or anything. It was just, hey, we've got a new chip in there now. Have fun with that. Came with 4 or 8 gigs of RAM and up to 512 gigs of storage as well. The Pro 2 is basically identical to the Pro 1, except it has that dual kickstand sort of positioning, so you can have sort of slightly better lappability. But apart from that, I think they were pretty much the same. Maybe the battery was slightly increased. It still didn't do enough to fix the battery life on the Surface Pro line at that point. It was still terrible. These products still overheated. So much so, if you remember, Microsoft brought out a type cover accessory called the Power Cover, and it had a battery in it, and you could connect to that and it would give you an extended battery life because it had a battery built into the type cover part. That was only around for 1 generation. They got rid of that product very quickly. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the Pro 2? I'll go Dan first.
I don't have strong feelings of this device, mostly because it was iterative.
Yeah.
Didn't change too much, but the changes there were nice, right? You're getting the kickstand changes. The processor stuff, I remember, was confusing. And it did suffer this problem like the Surface 2 did, which was it was only a year since the previous one. So it seemed better in a lot of ways. But if you had just bought Surface Pro 1, you're like, oh man, what the heck? I just got this thing.
Yeah.
And we weren't used to those yearly updates. I don't know for a grade. I mean, I guess still a C for me.
Yeah. What do you think, Jez?
I think a C as well. Like I did upgrade to the Pro 2, and I remember being disappointed that it didn't feel like much of an upgrade. So like, I was kind of like, man, I thought this would be like way better than the Surface Pro 1, but it wasn't really.
No.
And in some ways, I don't remember why, but I remember thinking in some ways this is worse. Like, I don't know what was worse about it, but I remember being really disappointed that it wasn't a bigger leap than I'd expected. So I think maybe it got hotter or something.
Yeah, it was hotter, and I think
remember
the
exactly
battery
what it
life was technically worse because the chip that they put in it was way more hungry.
Yeah.
And they just didn't have the room to
I think,
put it.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the battery life was worse. I remember now, and it did get hotter. So yeah, I might even drop this down to a D. Man,
I'm leaning on D.
This is main machine at the time.
Yeah, I'm leaning on D.
So...
I wasn't this. I remember I never owned this one personally, but I remember people who did own this complaining about it non-stop. It wasn't. It was them pushing that specific design to the limit. I think it was like, hey, we've built this. It was fine for the first gen. The second gen, we put a newer chip in there. It's not working out too well. We're going to have to change it up quite significantly for the third one, which they eventually do. But yeah, I think D tier for the Surface Pro 2. It wasn't an improvement over the Pro 1, not really. Yes, the kickstand did help with the laughability, but that's all it did. And I think the Surface Pro form factor at that point was suffering from a lot more than laughability issues. It was just, it almost couldn't do your job on it because it was overheating and throttling a lot. But yeah, unless anyone has any serious problems with the D tier listing, that's where I'm putting it.
That's fine.
All right, what came next? Give me a sec to pull up my list here. I do have
Surface
a list.
3.
Surface 3. Oh yeah, the Intel Surface 3. So at this point, I do actually have one. Let me show it to you. At this point, Microsoft had given up on Windows RT and ARM in general. They were like, okay, for our entry-level Surface line, we're just going to go Intel. It had an Intel Atom, I believe. Give me 1 second.
Yep.
To pull up the exact...
X7, Z8700.
It was trash. But it was a big sort of moment for the Surface team, because it was them sort of admitting that yes, the RT stuff we were doing wasn't going anywhere. We don't want to kill off the line. We will adapt it and take it where the market is, and the Surface 3 was that. I've just realized the Pro 3 technically did come first, but we'll briefly mention that as well, because the Pro 3 introduced the new Surface Pro design, and the Surface 3 copied it. So in fact, I'm going to put the Surface 3 back for a minute, and we'll talk about the Surface Pro 3, because that's the big moment, right? Everybody sort of remembers the Pro 3 as being, this is the moment for Surface. This product line is going from just sort of an experimental idea that isn't really working to something that people can actually look at and go, oh, that's a viable option for a Windows PC going forward. The Surface Pro 3 was announced on June 20th, 2014. It had an Intel Core i3, i5, or i7 of the 4th generation tier, I believe. It had a larger 12-inch, I think, a larger 12-inch display with pen support, of course. It was a 3x2 display, which was a big change from the Surface Pro 1 and Pro 2, which was 16:9, and it had an unlimited friction kickstand, so you could position it at any angle. The last big change was that they also introduced a new type cover that had magnets along there, so you could prop the type cover up, and that, in combination with the kickstand, meant that this device was actually quite a bit more laughable than the previous two. Dan, what are your thoughts on the Pro 3? Because I think everybody agrees here the Pro 3 is probably the gold standard for what Surface eventually became.
So I actually wrote an article, actually it was last year, and I updated it for this year. It was 8 years ago, Microsoft released the era-defining Surface Pro 3. So I got to give it at least a B. I can't give it an A because it's not there yet, but there was so much about this device that this is where Surface Pro started coming into its own, where it started getting the design right? So instead of the 16:9, it's a 10.8-inch display, as you mentioned, it's 3:2 aspect, and it went to 12 inches and a higher resolution. So this is now starting to really change the shape of it. Yeah. And I remember meeting with them, and they were talking about how they wanted it to reflect like a notepad, like a piece of legal paper. Mm-hmm. That's why they went with the 3:2. And all this started making sense with the pen and everything. It was pretty thin. The kickstand it was 3 degrees this time, if I recall, right? 3 different settings for the kickstand.
No, the kickstand wasn't limited. The normal Surface 3 had 3 positions, but the Pro 3 had the unlimited one.
Oh, there you go. So that you have that aspect. This is at least a B for me, right? This is the device where reviews started to come around to the idea. Up until this point, this is where you had the articles going, what's Microsoft doing? OEMs hate them. This thing is stupid. It's not an iPad. Microsoft should just give up. And like everybody was kind of like in that, that mode. And it started changing with Surface Pro 3 because the reviews were more positive. I think there's still skepticism, but it was months later when they finally reported their earnings where it actually was like, oh, they're starting to actually sell these things now. It's actually starting to make money and be profitable. Well, we don't know if it was ever profitable, but it at least started selling way better and kind of catching on.
What do you think, Jez? Is he there?
Yeah, he was just typing.
Muted because I was muted because I was coughing and typing something. But yeah, Surface Pro 3, like this is a Pro 3 we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Not the 3.
The Pro.
I still get them mixed up sometimes. But yeah, I upgraded to the Pro 3 as well. I was still hard on that Surface train at the time, and I think like because I'd been disappointed with the. See, I didn't really understand the relationship between the i7 and how hot things got.
Yeah.
So I just went like I was disappointed with the Surface Pro 2 performance, and I was like, sorry, I'm not doing very well. I was like, I'm just gonna go for the all-out high-end model to really get the performance that I wished I had out of the Surface Pro 2, and I was like. I was really, really happy with every aspect of it. But it was around this time where I started getting fed up with how hot the devices got. Surface Pro 3 was so damn hot. Mm-hmm. It was just like trying to do like the kind of work that I was doing, which was like even... Was I at Windows Central when the Pro 3 came out? I don't think so. When did that launch?
2014.
2014. No, I joined Windows Central in 2015, so I think maybe I did have it when I joined, but when I got it, I was still working as an IT guy. So, like, I think that was the point where I started getting tired of how hot they got. Like, it got worryingly hot running any sort of, like, above average task, like running Dreamweaver or something with, like, a bunch of PHP files open or something. Which are basically just text files at the end of the day. I started getting tired of it getting really warm, and over time it just sort of became barely usable for what I was trying to do. But at the same time, I got to respect the fact that for a lot of people it was the Surface that sort of brought it more mainstream. So while I still sort of lament the fact that it's sort of like had those limitations that sort of betray the chips they were putting in it, like the power of the hardware they're trying to squeeze into this tiny machine didn't really match the form factor, I think, at the time, just because of technological limitations. But so in that mind, I'd give it a B.
Yeah.
Because it was the Surface that sort of really launched the brand and really sort of made Apple sit up and look at it like, oh damn, we need to take this more seriously, you know. So yeah. But yeah. I still that was the point I was started to get turned off from the brand with the Surface Pro 3, weirdly.
Yeah, you're right about the overheating. The i7 model specifically was very prone to that. I think the i5 and the i3 ones were less so. So yeah, I don't remember the exact details around that. But the thing that stood out to me at the time was this was the first Surface Pro that was around the same thickness as the ARM surfaces that had come before it. The Pro 1 and the Pro 2 were super thick. The Pro 3 was as thin as the Surface RT and the Surface 2. And that blew me away because I was able to, I think this was the first Surface Pro I ever actually reviewed. And I was just shocked by how thin it was. Obviously, that was helped by the fact that it was taller, so they could actually sort of put more in, but just spread it out further. But that, to me, was sort of the big moment. I think this is B. Did we all go with B there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is B. It is the one that sort of proves that the form factor can work, but there's still room for improvement, and we will see that sort of continue with the Pro 4, which I think came next. What came next? Give me a sec.
We gotta do Surface 3.
That's right. The Surface 3 came next. So yes.
But before we jump there, I just want to point out a couple of things. This was also the first Surface. It swapped out Wacom for Intrig, which Microsoft later bought for their pen technology. So that was a big shift.
Yeah.
It also, of course, was the first to go platinum for the Pro series. It was the first to have the optional Core i7, which we just was problematic, but it was an option. It was a lighter chassis. It also was the first to have connected standby. So this was the ability to basically, when you would flip the lid or the keyboard, it would just kind of come on way quicker. It was going to get notifications and everything like that, versus the old ones where you'd have to like hit the power button and wait for it to come back on. So this was what became fast resume and everything. It had dual 5-megapixel cameras, which was at the time pretty massive. If you think about it, laptops today, most don't ship with a 5-megapixel front-facing camera. It's like HP's doing them and a few other companies, but it's still pretty rare. And that's when the cameras really started. They started really focusing on having good cameras. And the type cover improved with a 60% larger new glass trackpad with a mechanical click. So this was like, it was really a big change for them. And in fact, there was you can argue that up until this point, they basically kind of killed the old concept of Surface.
Yeah.
And this was kind of the rebirth. Although in an interview with Mobile Syrup, I think it was, Panos Panay basically said they always wanted to get to Pro 3. They just couldn't do it at the time when Pro 1 was coming out. But that was always kind of the goal to get to this.
Yeah, it had been 2 years since the Surface RT and Surface Pro at this point. So it does make sense that they couldn't get to where they wanted to back then. But by this point, they were able to sort of manufacture it at a price where that was reasonable. Because I think the Pro 3 launched at $799, which wasn't, these days, doesn't sound terrible at all. But back then was I think maybe it was a bit overpriced for the i3. But it was still sort of better than, I think, because the Surface RT launched at $599 or $699, which was ridiculous. But yeah.
Did you know also? Just dropping also to Time Magazine included the Microsoft Surface Pro 3 in the list of the 25 best inventions of 2014.
Wow, there you go. See, it did have an impact, and it did, seriously, because let's be honest, the Pro 3's design, although they do iterate on it slightly, that sort of main design sticks with the Surface Pro line up until the Pro 7 Plus in 2021, which we will get to. But before that, we need to talk about the Surface 3. As I mentioned, that was the sort of successor to the Surface 2. They'd gone with Intel, had a Intel Atom chip, 2 or 4 gigs of RAM, and 64 or 128 gigs of storage. It sort of adopted the same design as the Surface Pro 3, so it had a taller 3:2 aspect ratio, a much better display, 1920 by 1280 compared to the Surface 2 and Surface RT. It also supported Pen, which was the first non-Surface Pro to do so as well. The only thing that it didn't really get from the Surface Pro is obviously the more powerful chips, but it also didn't get the unlimited kickstand. It only had it had 3 positions. This one, then there was a second position, and then there was a new third position. And I think this is the only Surface that ever shipped with this third position, because all the other Surfaces from here on out have unlimited friction hinges, which is much better in my opinion. But yeah, I'll share my thoughts on this one first. This sucks. This was a miss for the Surface team, I think, only because of the Intel Atom chip. It just wasn't good, and Intel Atom has never been good. And I think you was paying $500 starting for this with an Intel Atom, 2 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage. It just wasn't for me. I didn't like this product very much. What are your thoughts, Dan?
So, I assume you're probably going to give it a grade of a D, which I would agree with. Yeah. In principle, except there's one thing about the Surface 3 that was a game changer for me, and I actually loved it for. Do you remember? Do you know the one thing?
I don't.
It was the first Surface to have LTE.
Oh, it was. You're right. Yeah. Good point.
That was a game changer for me. I remember going down to the AT&T store and buying one, and throwing a SIM in there. I was going on hikes at the time. I thought this was the coolest thing ever. I could just be out for the day, crack this thing open, go on the internet, and use it. You're right, the performance was terrible. It was doable, again, depending on what your workload was. You can keep it pretty basic, but it was, Atom has never been a good processor to use. But it was a bold attempt. But you're right, it was a miss overall. But because it had LTE, it always sticks in my head as like, that's why I first fell in love with true mobility. That's always been a thing for me, true mobility. I need it because I hate the idea of taking a laptop. As soon as you walk out your door, it's useless.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do with it now? You can use a word processor, right? So this just was a game changer for me. So I want to give it a C, but if you guys both give it a D, I totally understand that.
Yeah. Jazz, what are your thoughts?
I'm also going to give it a C.
Oh my God.
Kind of like Dan, for personal reasons. Like I was on this mission to sort of make sure everyone in my family had some kind of Surface or Windows phone, and I actually bought one of these for a sibling, so they could get through university, and they used it with the Atom processor for university, just for word processing and stuff like that, and like. I think I didn't buy it at launch. I got a really good deal on one. I got it for like 300 quid or something, which I think was that cheaper than what they launched for. I felt like at the time I got a good deal on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and they used it for years and years, put stickers all over it, and it was battered and it had a cracked screen, and it still kept going on. So while I appreciate that, like, it was probably a downer for the brand. Like on a personal level, I'm kind of pleased at how much usage, my family got out of it. So I'm going to give it a C, just to contradict you.
Guys, it used a micro USB port for charging. How is this a C?
That was terrible.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Fine, I'll put it in the C tier.
Actually, come to think of it, I remember the reason she stopped using it was because it wouldn't charge anymore.
Yeah, mine's the same. No matter what micro USB charger I found, no matter how powerful it was supposed to be, it would never charge the Surface 3. You had to use the first party one, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, for that, okay, I think let's give it a D.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I guess give it a D. I just remembered that now. I remembered, like, struggling with this, like, why won't this thing charge?
Yeah.
So yeah, let's give it.
It's what and
my
this
fond memories went away when you said that.
And this was as they like to say, a learning or teachable moment for the Surface team. This is one reason, this very device, why they didn't go to Type-C charging, and they always kept Surface Connect, because they had so many issues with that micro USB and people losing the charger and not being able to use a third-party one. So, I'm definitely biased, like I said, because it was the first with LTE, but yeah, I think D is okay.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Surface Pro 4. We're getting to that October 2015 event now, which was sort of a huge monumental event for all of us Surface fans. So we'll start with the Pro 4. I don't actually have one with me here. The Surface Pro 4 was I'd call it a minor upgrade over the Surface Pro 3. There were some design changes. They increased the screen size by 0.3 inches, so it went from a 12-inch to 12.3 inch. That thinned the bezels ever so slightly. It had a Intel Core i5 or i7 6th gen Skylake processor, 8, or for the first time ever, 16 gigs of RAM and up to 512 gigs, 1 terabyte of SSD storage. So that was a first for the Surface Pro line as well. Dimension-wise, it's basically the same shape and size. It's not any thicker, I don't believe. So yeah, this was a minor upgrade over the Pro 3. Introduced Windows Hello, which I think is game-changing for Surface. That was the first device to sort of be announced with it, and to this day, all of them have it, except for the laptop SE. And it launched with Windows 10. It was the first Windows 10 Surface Pro. So what are your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I actually love so I reviewed this too, and I love going back to my old reviews because I was so smart. I always do the TLDR of what's new from the previous version, which is so helpful. You're right. So 6th gen Intel Skylake, higher resolution display, slightly larger screen. So this came to the 12.3 inch, which they stuck with now for years. Yep. Was slightly lighter, increased level of pressure sensitivity for the pen. So instead of 256, it went to 1024, which was a big jump. You mentioned Windows Hello. I mean, that was a big deal. Updated distributed cooling system. Storage increased to 1 terabyte. They went from mSATA to PCIe 3 for storage. Maximum RAM went to 16 gigs. And it went to a higher starting price of $899, actually. Yeah. So this one definitely a B, I think, for me. Yeah. This is what classic Surface Pro is. They stuck with this design for what people would say was far too long until Surface Pro 8. And for the rest, you could almost say they were just literally iterative updates. But this one really changed everything in terms of this is it. This they finally arrived at their original vision of what Surface Pro was supposed to be.
Yeah. Jez?
Now, I got a funny story about this because I mentioned that I was using the Surface Pro 3 as my main computer. And then when I joined Windows Central, it was like, man, I need something even more powerful now because like sometimes I do video. So I came into it. So I never got some of these products at launch, but like at this point in my life, I was at this specific point in my life, not necessarily the Surface Pro 4. I started to get blurry on the launch dates because when I was working at Windows Central, my sort of attention came away from Surface a bit, and I sort of focusing more on Xbox because that's my coverage area. But at the time, I had a Surface Book 1, I think, and I'd given my Surface Pro 3 to my girlfriend to use as to replace her Surface 2, and she she used it a lot all over the place. The screen was cracked and the kickstand was broken and there was a lot of problems with it. And when I was because I live between two countries because my girlfriend's German and I live in the UK. I was visiting the UK, and while I was visiting the UK, my girlfriend really broke the screen on the Surface Pro 3, like really badly. And she didn't want me to know that she'd broken the screen, because because I was like, look, after this, it's quite delicate, it's not like old school technology you could just sort of throw around and it'll still work, it's glass, so be careful with it. She broke the screen, and what she did was she took it to some random PC repair shop in Germany. They'd never seen one before, and they were like, oh yeah, we can repair this, we can repair anything. So like, oh man, I wish I had a picture of it. When I came back to Germany, man, you would have wept. You should have seen this Surface Pro 3. They'd ripped that because it's all glued together, right? To be fair, they'd repaired it, but they had to basically destroy it to repair it. It worked, but my God, it looked like Frankenstein's monster now. It was like, I'm amazed that it worked. They replaced the display, but they had to completely destroy the PC to do it. So it was all bent, and the sort of the bezel had like this massive gap with jagged edges where they'd sort of levered the glue off. It looked horrible. So I was like, my God, I went. My plan was, let's see if we can get Microsoft to repair this. So I put the serial number into Microsoft's repair website, and I was like, oh yeah, it's out of warranty. We'll replace it for like 300 quid or something, because it was quite old at this point. I think we're on the Surface Pro 6 at this point when I tried to get this repaired, and they said we'll replace it to a Surface Pro 4 for 300 quid if we can't repair it. So like they took it, and they must have looked at it and just been like, we'll just replace it. So they sent us that's how I got a Surface Pro 4. It was like a replacement from this Frankenstein repair job that some company had done at Surface Pro 3. But my girlfriend used that Surface Pro 4 for years, and she did loads of art on it because, like you said, the pen was upgraded. And she really got into digital art because of the Surface Pro 4. Like she used to draw on paper before. The Surface Pro 4 took her to like that sort of, I really want to get into digital art now, and using I can't remember what the app's called now, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But she started using like one of them more simple drawing apps, Sketchable, using Sketchable. And now she's graduated up to Photoshop, and she's really getting into it. So for me, I give the Surface Pro 4 a B. Again, it's sort of, we probably used the Surface Pro 4 and had the Surface Pro 4 the longest out of any of my Surface devices, I think. Yeah. And I only replaced it for her this year with we on the Pro 7. Yeah. I replaced it with the Pro 7 only this year. And she used the hell out of that machine, and thankfully she didn't break the screen on this one. So.
Yeah.
I got it at home too. It
was the first one to use the G5 coprocessor for inking, which was their new technology to help improve the way it worked and everything. In my original review, I said The Surface Pro 4 is basically the Surface Pro 3 perfected. I think that's a pretty good case. I'm almost giving it an A.
Yeah, I'm leaning on A.
I think, yeah.
I was gonna say, why isn't it an A? Well, why wouldn't it be an A? Well, what were the downsides? Did it overheat still? I think it was a little bit hot on the i7.
I think they always had problems with that. There was some issues with Windows Hello initially, so software issues. The price, it was $100 more than the previous one, so that was a change. And the battery life was still okay, but it wasn't amazing. But that's that's going to be an issue for Surface Pro forever.
Right. Okay, yeah, maybe we'll stick with B then, because I think there is a Surface Pro coming up that might be A tier, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Next up is the Surface Book. This was...
Oh, I got thoughts about this.
Yeah, the Surface Book's an interesting one, because it was announced alongside the Surface Pro, with basically the same chips as well, I believe. So an i5 or an i7 6th gen Intel chip, 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, up to 1 terabyte of storage. But this was a laptop. It was announced as a laptop, but there was a one more thing moment at the end of the event where Microsoft was like, oh, by the way, this is also a tablet, and the screen detached from the keyboard. It was an amazing moment. Everybody cheered. This was exciting. Lots of people had been asking Microsoft for a long time now, just make a laptop, and this was basically the closest thing so far to a laptop that they had made. It had a 13.5-inch touchscreen display which supported pen. It had a dedicated GPU in the keyboard. I think it was up to a GeForce GTX 965M. Or I think it was a 940M in the original keyboard. Then a year later they released a performance base which had a 965M. That's right. But this wasn't cheap. It started at $1,500. And that's sort of been the story of the Surface Book ever since. It's always super expensive for what it really offers, but you're buying that design, that unique form factor, and this was the Surface Book. This was the first version, and I think it wowed everybody at the event. But when it launched, it was a different story. Guys, what are your thoughts on the Surface Book? We'll start with Dan.
I mean, I loved it, right? The form factor was incredible. Up until this point, the criticisms of Surface Pro were what? It's not a real laptop. And for some people it was. For other people, it will never be, right? Yeah. And this was their creative answer to that criticism. And I say creative because it could have just made a Surface laptop, which of course it did years later. But Surface Book was really kind of a defining device. And that moment where the screen detached, I remember I was live, I was there in the audience, and I gasped. It was like, oh my God, it was so crazy. The performance was always just okay though, because the internals were all behind that display. And that's where, compared to other laptops that were often cheaper, the performance was never lived up to it. But then it allowed you to do things that no other laptop could do in the world, and that was really fascinating. And then they came out with the performance one, which I reviewed, and it was nice, right? I was actually able to play Gears of War 4 on it, so it was like, okay, that's something. It's not a gaming laptop, but if you wanted to, at a pinch, you could definitely play games on it, and it was okay. I thought that was a cool, clever thing that they did. I don't know. Yeah, this always comes back to the fact that Surface Book is no longer with us. Rest in peace. Because as great as the design was, people just didn't gravitate and ended up using its core function. But at the time, I got to give it an A, just because this was when we saw, Microsoft is not a one-trick pony when it comes to hardware. They're really thinking outside the box of what this stuff could be like. And they tried, and although it didn't catch on, it was still, it drew a lot of attention. The downside was it did have a lot of software issues when it first launched. The Skylake processor, Windows Hello, it had a lot of battery performance issues with Skylake. They eventually resolved those, but man, if you bought that laptop in those first couple months, you're probably hating it. And that almost cost people jobs at Microsoft because of that. But I think that conceptually, if you put that stuff aside, it was a home run. Even just in terms of PR, it was a massive hit for them.
Yeah. Jazz, what are your thoughts?
Man, I don't think any product has produced in me such a range of emotions. Man, I remember that when the trailer with the music and the thing coming off, like, oh my God, it's like it was one of the best tech reveals in history for me.
Yeah, I agree.
It was just so damn cool. It was like marketing genius to take what looked like if they'd shown that, just like with a stage demo with some like guy who can't present, everyone would have been like, "That's dumb.
Yeah.
That makes no sense." But because of the ad, it was like, "Wow, that's incredible." I don't know why it's incredible, but it's incredible, and it totally worked on me because I was going through this whole Surface journey. Like, I really like this. It feels good, but I need something more powerful, or I need something with better battery life. So I thought the natural progression of the Surface Pro was to go the Surface Book, right?
Yeah.
And my workload got increasingly more demanding. So Surface Book seemed like the most logical thing, and they did all that presentation. They showed I believe they showed Gears of War running on it when they, or am I thinking of a different Surface Book? Maybe it was the Book 2. They showed Gears of War running on it. I can't remember, but they didn't say it was for gaming. In fact, they said it's not for gaming, but here's a game running on it.
Yeah,
which is kind of like a bait and switch, right? They were like, oh, they said it's not for gaming, but there's a game running on it, So I sort of I just in my head, I was like, this is going to solve all my problems. It's going to solve the issues with the heat generation. It's going to have better battery life because it's physically bigger. It's going to be more powerful, blah, blah, blah. So I got it and I loved it, but I grew to hate it, And I've written about this on Windows Central, right? I loved it at first, and I take it everywhere with me. Everyone who saw it was like, wow, this amazing device. Like, this hinge is so crazy. And I used to use it all over the house. I loved how portable it was while also being so powerful. But the product just didn't make any sense. I never, ever detached the screen.
Right.
And it wasn't just because it didn't work half the time. It was just, there was just no necessity to do it. As a tablet, it was just too damn big. There was just literally no reason under any circumstance to detach that screen other than to be like, look what I can do. Click, show someone, and then put it back. Because there's literally no reason to ever detach the screen. The only reason to detach the screen, which they've solved now with the Book Studio, is to reverse the display so you can do some drawing. But the Surface Book, the Surface, what do they call it? Surface Book Studio? Is that what it's called?
Laptop Studio.
Laptop Studio. Which is a dumb name. They should have just called it the Book 3. But they've solved the reason you detach the screen with the Laptop Studio. There's no reason to detach the screen, So while I loved it initially, and I do, the technologist in me, appreciate. Is that even a word? Technologist? I don't know. I just made a word up. But okay, good. That Dan saved me. But yeah, I loved it, and the technologist in me loves that they do think out the box and innovation. But sometimes you shouldn't do things just because you can. And the Surface Book totally represents that for me. So I'm going to give it a D.
Oh wow!
It was my main computer, and I had so many issues with it. Blue screens, overheating like crazy. It was unusable in the summer, straight up unusable in Germany. It was clearly designed and made in a place with air conditioning, because in Europe we don't have any. So I needed a device that can actually dispense heat. And this was like the first Surface where I could only use it by blasting the back of the screen with a fan,
right,
and adding to the heatsink. I ended up despising this laptop. So I'm going to give it a D, because when you cut through all that flashiness and that marketing, it was a terrible product.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense for anyone.
D is a rough ranking. That's real harsh.
Yeah, I'm mad at it. It put a massive dent in my wallet, and just gave me nothing but grief towards the end.
See, I didn't have that same experience. I had a Surface Book, but I guess my workflow is just different to yours. Mine, don't get me wrong, it could have been better, but I don't remember ever being super frustrated with the first Surface Book. I don't think it's an A, though. I think it's a B, only because the Surface Book 2, I think, is an A. But we'll get to that when we get to that. So I'm going with B. I don't know, Dan, are you sticking with A?
I could be convinced of a B.
Yeah.
There's definitely, like I said, in terms of PR, in terms of attention that this gathered, and showing that Microsoft could do more than a Surface Pro, I think they hit it out of the park. But I think Jez is also right. The software and the execution of it, left a lot to be desired. I don't necessarily agree with the performance stuff as much, but that comes down to how you were planning or anticipating on using this laptop. So we can land on a B or a C. I'd be okay with that.
I think we're gonna go with B. I think because I was blown away by this product when it was announced. Where is it? Here it is. And I think they do improve it with the second version. So we'll get to that when we do. But D is understandable if you were pushing this to its limit and it wasn't delivering. And then certainly at launch, it was maybe deserved that ranking. But over time, it did improve. And I remember just loving my Surface Book for the entire time I had it. So yeah, that was a controversial one, I think.
Yeah, I was just pushing it like, because they talked about all this stuff on stage.
You're right, they did.
You can do programming on it, you can do video editing on it, but you couldn't do any of that shit. Oh, I'm swearing again. Sorry.
No, yeah, I think you're right, but I think D is real harsh because it was from a form factor perspective. It certainly was pushing the boat out, and I think it was their first. It was their first laptop, and I do think they do learn things with the second one and stuff. So we'll get to that. What came after?
Maybe I'll go up to a C. I'll go up to a C. Yeah.
Well, I think we're settling on B.
You are right. They did innovate. I'm just salty about it because I really wanted more out of it. You know.
Yeah. What came next? 2016. So that was the last Surface sort of consumer one until the Surface Studio, right? Where is the Surface Studio here? Surface Studio. Yeah. So Surface Studio was announced, I think, October 2016. It was Microsoft's first desktop. It was a 28-inch touchscreen with pen support in a design that allowed it to sit up like a monitor upright, and then you could put it down and lay it down like a draft board so you could draw on it and stuff. It launched with an Intel i5 or an i7 6th generation Skylake processor, up to 32 gigabytes of RAM. This was the first Surface 2 offer that option of 32 gigs, up to 2 terabytes of a rapid hybrid drive. We'll get to that. Yeah, this was really interesting. It had a 965M or a 980M on the inside. Beautiful product, I think, but from a specs perspective, kind of flawed. For the price you were paying for this, which, by the way, started at $3,000, it just never delivered the performance that I think people were expecting when you were paying this much. Dan, what are your thoughts? Is Dan not there?
I'm muted.
Yeah, sorry. Hey, there's a motorcycle outside. In terms of wowing people and PR and just really surprising the world, again, they should get an A for that. It was just so creative and innovative, and again, got us to rethink what a PC should be, or could be at least. But it was a very narrow demographic, too, that was going to really benefit from this. I remember Microsoft didn't even send us one for review. They didn't give it to a lot of outlets.
How dare they?
Partly because it was so expensive. We ended up just buying one, which I still have. And yeah, the hardware was disappointing in terms of performance. But again, it came down to what you're trying to do with it.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily mind the performance, but what really bothered me was the hard disk drive. That was the worst aspect of it, because that was such a step back in performance. But yeah, again, PR pushing the industry forward, A. But in terms of execution and what you're getting for the money, probably a C.
See, for me, it's a C as well, only because of that hybrid drive. I had a Studio One that I upgraded that hybrid drive to an actual SSD, and that improved the performance twofold for me. Like, if that was what it was shipped with, then I would have given it a B. But because of that hybrid drive, I think it's a C tier device. What do you think, Jez?
It's a D.
D? Wow. Why?
It's just because, like, how you're gonna make a device, right, that costs that much, that has a screen that big, and you don't make it like an actual PC. Right. It's like laptop grade performance when you put in like a hybrid drive in there and stuff like that. But like I remember Dan like coming out of one of the meetings just gushing, not about the device itself, but about what he'd learned about the engineering behind the hinge work. Like they had to develop they had to develop like new hinge technology. Like Surface is a company of hinge makers.
Yeah, they call them hingineers. No, I mean, again, like you could like do a lot of amazing creative work and technology and still not have it be a good product. That's fine.
Yeah.
But like that display,
it's gorgeous.
Display is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are just doing office and productivity, sitting behind that display is an absolute joy. So
here's what they should have done. They should have just sold the display with a base and the hinge.
Of course.
And then just attack, and then be like, look, this is the perfect display for serious graphic designers or whatever. Because game devs would love that, using ZBrush and stuff, and attach it to a real computer, like a desktop or something. That would have been the product that made sense with that hinge. But they just slapped like this middling little box at the bottom with sort of disappointing kind of specs, and it just kind of threw the whole proposition for me. Because I looked at that thing, and I was still on my Surface kick at the time, and that's when the magic sort of died. Because I was like, I looked at the price, I looked at the performance to price ratio, I think, like, really got me. And I suppose also because it was big. I had nowhere to put it, I guess, which also sort of cut through some of the wow factor for me. Because again, it was a lot of wow factor attached to that reveal. So but nah, I'll just being cynical. So I'll give it a C, maybe.
Yeah, I think
it's another one of them. This is sort of like, it's obvious where this could have been better. If this was positioned as a monitor, and I still think they should do that. They should sell these things as a damn monitor. And screw trying to make a computer out of it. Sell it as a monitor. Sell it as something that you can attach a Surface Pro to, or a Surface Laptop Studio, or just like a Surface laptop. Sell it in that context. Because it doesn't. It's like you can ink on a Surface laptop, but you can't really, unless you like lay it on its side and like have the keyboard sticking up. But you could sell like these laptop studio monitors, like large size, smaller size, with the hinge, and just be like, if you are a laptop Surface laptop user and you do want to do some real digital work, here's a monitor for you.
Yeah.
And they don't sacrifice that great hinge work.
Putting that aside, that they should do a display, because that's always the argument. Are any of us actually qualified? I think this was a tough part of the review I had to do on it. Are any of us really qualified to review these things in terms of the target demographic? Because I'm not an engineer, I'm not a professional artist, I don't do anything with the pen really besides, maybe do notes or stuff like that. Like, how do those people feel about it in terms of performance and what it can do? And I feel like that's one, part of us are reviewing it in the sense of what we wish it to be, because we like to game, we like to use, these certain apps, we need all this power, we like multitasking, versus what the audience really was. And I will say, at least going after that really niche target market is also kind of its downside too, because it's not going to get widespread availability or interest from a lot of people.
Nah, that's definitely true. Like, where I live in Germany, there's actually like, and this is also like hilarious how different the culture is here. Because if this was in my town in England, there's no way this would happen. But there's like, I was walking through town in Germany, and there's like an office building, and I was walking past, and I was like, hang on a sec. And in the front window, there's like an office, and inside they've got like 3 Surface Studios around a desk. And I'm like, if that was my town, those would be stolen. They would not be there still. The window would be smashed and they would be stolen, But where I live in Germany, there's like, you can do that for some reason. But I walked past, I wasn't like spying on the guy. But it's the first time I'd seen one in person as well. And I was just fascinated, because he had like, there was just Excel spreadsheets all over the screen, And sure, you can just buy a massive display for that, but I was kind of thinking, like, it'd be cool if you could lay the screen down fully flat and use it like a Surface table in like a sort of networking conference. But again, it goes back to what Dan was saying, that you're thinking about it like in terms of what we would want it to be and how we'd want it to be better and stuff like that. But yeah, I suppose for like semi-professional or professional artists who maybe like running a home business, and they do pretty well at it, maybe it'd be a really good device for them. But I think even for like casual art, it's way too expensive for what it is. And I think like a pro grade artist would want something that was more powerful, for ZBrush and stuff. So
yeah,
it's hard to think where this niche would really fall, really.
Yeah, I think I'm giving it a C. I do think it's a C tier because it is beautiful, but that hybrid drive for me is what really kills it. That was just unacceptable for a device like this. So yeah, everyone agree with C?
Yep.
Good. Up next is Surface Pro 2017. So this was the next version of the Surface Pro line. This was, I think, there was over a year between this and the Pro 4. This was the Surface Pro 5, but they never called it Surface Pro 5. They just called it Surface Pro or Surface Pro 2017. This was Microsoft trying to sort of do what Apple does and get rid of the number and go, hey, this is just the new Surface Pro. So that lasted one generation, the Surface Pro 5. It launched with an Intel Kaby Lake CPU with the M3, i5 or i7, up to 16 gigs of RAM, up to 1 terabyte of storage. Design was basically exactly the same, except the edges of the device were slightly rounded now compared to the sort of angled flat sides of the Surface Pro 4. And I think that's basically the big changes to this one.
No.
No, is there anything else? Oh, LTE.
No. That came later, but this was the first to have a fanless Core i5.
Right, yes, that's a big deal. Yeah, you're right, yeah. So that was a big deal, of course, because I guess Intel had finally gotten to a point where they were like, hey, these aren't super hot anymore. And so Microsoft could remove the fan. So yeah, Dan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, listen, that Core I remember I had to write an article specifically explaining why it's not called Surface Pro 5.
Yeah.
And now they call it Surface Pro 5th gen.
Yeah.
They got rid of the 2017 part. But I love this one because of that fanless design. Now we're starting to get the best of both worlds. A fanless Core i5, which is now sort of like what we're talking about with the RT days, what the benefits were there. It was still thin. It kept everything that we kind of really liked about the original. They didn't change the design fundamentally, which I argued was a good thing. They did technically redesign this whole thing, though, in terms of, like, I remember the screws and everything about it was technically redesigned from the ground up. It just looked the same on the exterior. But everything about it was definitely a little bit better. The performance was better. That fanless system was better. I don't remember if there was too much different. I do remember this was when you and I were both out at Redmond. And this was just a fun moment because Panos Panay gave me a personal introduction to this device, and like it was me, him, and then like a bunch of PR people, and it was just like, and he had it under a cover and all this, and he explained like what the main differences were, and of course that ability to remove the fan is what allowed them then to do the LTE version, because where that fan space was allowed them to put the LTE modem in. And I thought that was super clever for them to do that. So for those reasons, I mean, maybe an A.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm leaning towards A. Jez, what do you think?
Now, this is one service that I've never really used. And this is the point in my life where I started kind of tuning out because I just inundated with Xbox work. So I was like, Zach and Dan can be the Surface guys. I just focused on Xbox. So this is the first service that I wasn't really fully aware of. So I almost feel guilty to comment on it. So I'm gonna have to defer to you guys for a tier ranking on this one, I think.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. There's two other things. This was also the first to introduce Alcantara for the keyboard.
Oh, wait. Wasn't this the first one that went black?
No, that was the next one.
The first modern Pro that went black. Oh, okay.
No, and this was they also bumped the pen to 4,096 levels, which again is a massive jump.
Yeah, I think A tier as well. I am leaning on A tier, but the Pro 6 is also amazing, and I think that one could also be A tier, because remember the Pro 6, we will get to it, but the Pro 6 goes from dual core to quad core. That was a big deal for Intel, because it was like, now we've got double the performance for basically no additional cost. But no, I think you're right. I think A tier for Surface Pro 5. This was, because remember, this was this exact design with the curved edges and all that stuff remained. This was the Pro 6, the Pro 7, and the Pro 7 Plus, more or less. There were no more sort of design changes externally.
Aren't they technically called chamfered edges?
Chamfered, maybe.
Yes.
They're slightly round. Leave me alone. But yeah, I'm putting this in the A tier. I think it's the first A tier Surface, because I don't remember this ever being controversial in any way. It launched and it did its job. Nobody was complaining. It did have an LTE model as well, so Dan loves it even more. I do remember the LTE model launching like a year later or something like that, or
Right.
like 9 months.
It wasn't that long, but it was definitely I think it was probably 8 months or something.
Yeah. No, you're right.
They also
go on.
There's also another thing they did was they blacked out the Windows Hello lenses to hide them.
Yeah, you're right. They did. Yeah, see, this was them just perfecting it.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is an A tier. I agree with that. All right, what is next? Give me 1 second to put up the list. We had the Pro 2017, and then it was Surface Laptop. So this is a personal favorite of mine, and annoyingly, the Wikipedia page has no information on it. Give me a sec. There we are. So Surface Laptop was announced on May 2nd, 2017 at a special dedicated education event, believe it or not. This was a device that was a true laptop. It had no gimmicks, had no form factor sort of anomalies. It was a straight up laptop designed to compete with the MacBook Air or a Dell Xps. The screen didn't attach. Did have the same size screen as a Surface Book, but with a slightly lower resolution, so 13.5 inches. Was available with an Intel Core M3, i5 or i7 7th gen Intel chip, up to 16 gigs of RAM, up to 1 terabyte of storage. And it had the only real unique thing about it was that the keyboard deck was covered in Alcantara. And this was this and the 2nd gen were the Surface laptops where you could only get it with Alcantara. There was no metal version. It was Alcantara or nothing. I really like this one. What do you guys think? Dan, you go first.
I'm going to give it an A. I mean, it still suffers from the traditional Surface problems of the performance is never as good as the competition. Mm-hmm. And this one had the double challenge of trying to justify its existence.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been asking Microsoft to do just a plain Surface laptop, and they finally do it. And a lot of people are like, what'd you do a Surface laptop for? And but there was so much innovation in this thing. So this was the beginning of them using their omnisonic speakers, where that is, they put 2 speakers below the actual keys of the keyboard, so there were no visible grills. Such an amazing design that people still just don't appreciate enough. So when you look down at that laptop, you don't see anything. It's just a keyboard and a trackpad. And a 720p front-facing camera, which was a step down, but it's because the display in the lid was so thin that they couldn't put a bigger one in there. The bezels weren't chunky. They weren't the thinnest. Dell Xps 13, of course, was out at this time. But when you would close it, it was silence. Yeah. In fact, funny story about this, I was going to tweet it out. In The Boys Season 3, someone's using a Surface laptop, 15-inch, and they go to close it. And when they close it, they actually had to dub in a clicking noise, like a normal laptop. But Surface laptop, of course, is just dead silent when you close it. And I think that's just totally awesome.
Yeah.
But I love the feel of this. The keyboard, the trackpad, the design, and it came in burgundy. And it never looked better.
Yes.
That was the best colorway that they ever did for this, and they later discontinued it. But the battery life was great on it. It was just, if you needed a solid laptop, it was, the fans were quiet.
Yeah.
They did a lot right with this. There was a Windows 10S thing, but that was not that big of a deal. You could turn it off,
so that's not a problem, yeah.
Yeah, but I absolutely loved it. And it supported pen. Now, could you really use the pen regularly on it? No, but at a pinch, it was kind of cool that you could do that. But the display was fantastic. It was just so clean and minimalist looking. It was just, I don't know, I love this thing.
Yeah, I agree. I remember them making a huge deal about how there was no lip on the front of the device when it was closed. Yeah. So you could just lift the device, the lid at any position. There was no dedicated sort of divot or groove for it. If you look at the new MacBook Air, if you look at the front of it, there's a big divot at the front of it, so you could get your fingers under the lid to lift it up. The Surface laptop to this day doesn't have that, and I think it looks better for it. Jez, what are your thoughts?
Sorry, I just got some breaking news there. And also, I just want to add, I rubbed something on my lips. It wasn't lip gloss. I'm not wearing lip gloss. It's Vaseline because my lips are cracked. Okay. So, Surface laptop. I never, the first time I got my hands on a Surface laptop was when Future just shipped us our company laptop.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, and isn't that a Laptop Go they sent?
Yeah,
I think it's a Surface Laptop Go they sent. So even this is my first experience with the what approximates to a Surface laptop experience, and even the Surface Laptop Go is wow, this is a really impressive laptop. If I was still the kind of person who used those kind of laptops, I think like Surface laptop is like, if someone was asking me what laptop would you recommend, something that I know is going to be like good, but also reliable, but also not ugly. I think Surface laptop is kind of going to be my go-to. As always, just generally be my go-to recommendation. My girlfriend's sister has one and uses one, I think, and it put her through uni and stuff. But again, it's another Surface I've only got sort of tangential experience with. So I probably have to defer to you guys, but I really like the look of it. It just irritates me that that they include inking, but there's no real support for inking. I always like, as in being able to ink beyond just poking the screen. And I think that's why, like, because my girlfriend's mom, right? So how much I shell for Surface? Like everyone I know got a Surface, right? But my girlfriend's mom, she wanted a laptop that she could also, but also like do a bit of doodling on. But she didn't want a Surface. She wanted a proper laptop. And until the laptop studio came around, there was nothing I could really recommend for her. So it still irritates me that they include inking in these devices, even though it doesn't make any sense, for me. So like, I ended up I think we got her a Lenovo Yoga in the end, because they do the fully reverse display, right? Mm-hmm. Which I thought always made more sense than detaching the screen and flipping it around. And I thought, like, I don't want to recommend my girlfriend get a Surface Book because I don't want her to suffer from everything that I suffered with. So we ended up getting her a Lenovo Yoga in the end. But but yeah, like I can't really feel like I can rate this in good faith. So I'm gonna have to defer to you guys, I think.
So you're leaning on A, right? Is this maybe an S tier device?
I forgot what's S tier?
S tier is like the best of the best. It doesn't get better than this.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Surface. You and I talk about this all the time on the podcast, which is there's an irrationality to a Surface laptop. It doesn't have a ton of ports.
Yeah, you're right.
There's no LTE. The performance isn't amazing, but it's still just so good.
It is
like
good.
I just till this day still love using a Surface laptop. So yeah, maybe an S. Yeah, I'll throw it up in an S.
Okay, yeah, maybe S, but also maybe the Laptop 4 is an S, because I feel like the Laptop 4 like just fixes everything that the Surface Laptop 1 maybe had a problem with. You got to remember, it didn't have Thunderbolt, which was at the time it was questionable, but then they still didn't have Thunderbolt for 2 more generations.
True.
So yeah, maybe we'll stick with A, and I think maybe we'll revisit the S tier for the Laptop 4 when that comes around. So A tier for Surface Laptop. What came next? We have the Surface Book 2, which launched November 16, 2017. So the Book 2 was an interesting one because it was the first time they introduced a 15-inch model, which was my personal favorite Surface Book. It came with an Intel Core i5 7th gen or 8th gen, also an i7 8th gen in the 15 and the 13 as well. 8 or 16 gigs of RAM in both sizes and up to 1 terabyte in both sizes as well. The GPU in this one, because the GPU is notable for the Surface Books, were on the 30.5 inch you had up to an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1050, and on the 15 inch you had a GeForce GTX 1060 with 6 gigs of RAM. From a design perspective, this was basically the same as the first Surface Book, but it was stuff on the inside plus the new 15-inch side that was sort of the noticeable changes with this device. Dan, what are your thoughts on the Surface Book 2?
So they made a lot of improvements to this device in terms of performance. It'll still never be as good enough for Jez, who wants it to be a gaming laptop, but like, and they didn't put Thunderbolt 3 on it, so that was another, like, now you're paying a lot of money for a really premium device and there's no Thunderbolt 3. So there is that. But in terms of performance and battery life, especially on a 15-inch version, like, it got really good battery life. Another oversight, this was at the time when they were pushing Windows Mixed Reality, and it was really difficult to get a headset to work with this laptop. It could work, but like there was no HDMI port.
You had to squeeze the cable.
Yeah, because they had
the cable around both sides of the device. It was so weird.
Yeah, they had it was a flanking port on each side, so you had to like stretch it around and all this kind of stuff. So it was clear that this was a time when Microsoft, were designing hardware and they didn't have things like Windows Mixed Reality in mind. And I think that was a real detriment to sort of the message that they're trying to push with Windows Mixed Reality. But overall, I think this was a great laptop to use. They improved a lot. It's the excellent build quality. I wrote it was a true gaming PC. It could actually game. Like this one now had a serious GPU in it. Now, where Jez is and there's no air conditioning, you may have issues keeping it cool because it still has that problem with everything's behind the display versus being in the base. But like I remember playing Destiny on this thing and just like, or it was Destiny or Destiny 2, I forgot which one it was at the time, but I was playing Destiny on it and it was fine for me. And yeah, the con's very expensive, no Thunderbolt 3 or eGPU support, which would have made it a better gaming machine. And the Windows Mixed Reality seemed like an afterthought. But I thought they did a really nice, there's always going to be compromise with the design. But considering the design itself, I thought they kind of really maximized what they could do in terms of performance with this version.
Yeah. Jez, what do you think? And Jez will have lots of thoughts on the book too, I think.
Oh, wait. I also want to point out the controversy about this one. This was remember they shipped it with a 102-watt charger, but if you maxed out everything, performance, the display, and you were gaming, you could actually drain the battery faster than it could charge. Mm-hmm. Now, that was a rare case, but that was an issue that they fixed later on.
Dude, it wasn't just games either. Like, I drained the battery using Adobe Premiere. Editing in 4K sometimes, you know, when it was really warm. And I think it might have been symptomatic of the fact that I did have to use a fan against the back of the display, and the fan was plugged into the Surface, so that probably drained the battery as well. And also because I was kind of overclocking it. Maybe that affected it as well. But anyway, this is the last Surface I ever personally owned. Take that as you will. But I was getting fed up with the Surface line at this point, and I was like, I'm gonna upgrade the Surface Book 2 because hopefully that'll give me everything I want out of a device. And it was great for gaming. You know, the battery drain issue while gaming was real. You know, it was real. I used to play World of Warcraft on this thing, which is not the most graphically intensive game, but it would drain the battery even when it's plugged in, which is just like, how do you design a device that does that? I've never had a laptop in my life.
Well, the issue is not the device. It was just that they didn't ship a more powerful charger.
Oh, right. So if I got a more powerful charger.
Yeah.
But were they available, though?
No, they eventually became available with the Book 3, but not until then.
Well, there you go. Well, I remember because I had a dock with this thing, and the dock would drain the battery, and also just plugging it in straight into the mains with the regular charger, that would drain the battery. So you know, for me, it's going to be a D, you know. It is, because it's going to be a D, because it had all the same issues design-wise as the first Surface Book. It had the whole battery drain thing, and I was just really tired of the whole proposition at this point. So, yeah.
I think this is an A. I think it's better than the first Surface Book for sure.
Yeah.
The chips were a little bit more efficient. They were more powerful, quad core up from a dual core, which was a huge deal for the CPU department. And then also the GPUs they put in here were also better as well. Also the 15-inch. I was in love with the 15-inch Surface Book. That was probably one of my top.
That's what
Surfaces.
I had.
Yeah, you used it for a long time. I remember that was your go-to device.
Yeah, I had a Surface Book 2 for a long time. Yeah, for sure. I think this is an A, unless Dan disagrees. Or where do you think it goes, Dan?
What was the original Surface Book?
B. It's a
what
B.
Was B? Yeah, I mean, for me, this fixed a lot of the issues. The power drain issue was real. I explicitly pointed that out. In fact, we were only one of a few publications at the time that noticed it and did something on that. But it didn't affect me.
Right, me neither.
Even when I would game and I would play Destiny, I didn't play Destiny for 3 hours. I'd play Destiny maybe for 45 minutes, an hour, or something like that. It was totally fine. So it never affected me personally. But for what I want to, and again, I never popped the display off, but I just using it as a laptop was awesome, especially the 15-inch it was a great display. Now, there was no display that looked like that at 15-inch.
Yeah, for sure. And there was no tablet at 15-inch for sure.
Right.
I'm going with A, unless you disagree.
No, I think so, because it's an improvement over the second one.
It is,
it's a significant improvement.
Yeah. All right, so that's an A for the Surface Book 2. Up next is the original Surface Go. This was announced on August 2nd, 2018. and it was essentially the Surface 4, the non-pro Surface 4. It was a successor to the Surface 3. It had an Intel Pentium Gold 4415Y on the inside, up to 8 gigs of RAM and up to 256 gigs of SSD storage. The entry-level model had 64 gigs of eMMC storage, though, which is notable because that caused a bit of controversy in the headlines. Started at $400, so this was the cheapest Surface had been yet, I believe, for a new Surface at least.
Yeah.
It had a 10-inch screen in the 3:2 aspect ratio. I've actually got one here to show you. It had unlike the Surface 3, the kickstand was the same one from the Pro series, so it had unlimited positions, which was really nice. It was super thin. It had USB-C, although not Thunderbolt. Had the Surface Connect port, which was a huge upgrade over the micro USB ports on the Surface 3. And that's basically all the notable things about it. Dan, what are your thoughts on the Surface Go?
Easy A.
Yeah, I love it.
Now, and I say that as someone who actually doesn't use the Go. I mean, as like, it never really worked its way into my normal workflow. You and I did cover an event. I forgot, it might have been Ignite, and you probably remember you're sitting next to me where, and I had it folded back. I was using it to take notes while using OneNote recording the audio. And that was actually a game-changing experience. Now, there are a lot of concerns in the term. Yeah, I don't love the processor. Again, Surface always has this issue where the performance isn't amazing. But there was nothing else it could do at the time, right? This is like they were restricted to whatever Intel had available on the market, and unfortunately it was the processor. But I also showed you can game on this thing, especially I showed it you can game on the 4 gigabyte version, which a lot of people had issues with, like, oh, 4 gigabytes, you can't do anything with that. And I did this video. It was where I was like, oh, look, I'm gaming on the Surface Go, it's fine. And I was like, oh, this is the 4 gigabyte version, by the way, because everybody thought it was the 8. And so I thought it was a really clever device. It was fun. It was a fun device. And, they brought over that amazing kickstand. They had the Surface Connect. They had a Type-C port. They had very good cameras on it.
Yeah.
Like, they brought over the core things that made Surface just a little bit downgraded. And, I thought that was really great. And I say that, again, as someone who, because I always had better laptops or Surface Pros around, I never, use this thing regularly. It was just too small in my lap. It was just but it was convenient. If I wanted to travel for a day trip, yeah, that thing was pretty fun to use. So easy A for me.
Jez?
I think I agree.
Yeah.
I think I agree. Because I remember being shocked how affordable this thing was.
Yeah.
And I think I upgraded my sister's Surface 3 to a Surface Go, I think. All the different members of my family have been on a different Surface journey due to me. Because she didn't need a full-blown laptop to really do, anything beyond sort of word processing on the sofa, really. Not even on the desk. And I think the Surface Go was the ideal device for very casual computing, but that wasn't cheap. You can get really cheap laptops that are $100 or $200, but they just suck.
Yeah.
I've had these two. I got because my mom, for example, she she does the odd bit of word processing and emailing, but very rarely, once a week. So it's you don't need $1,000 laptop to do work once a week or whatever. So we got a really cheap 200 pound laptop from one of these knockoff Chinese brands or whatever, and it died within a month. The laptop just died. It wouldn't turn on anymore. It wouldn't charge. And I was just man, I should have just got a Surface, because at least it's gonna actually work. You pay an extra $100 more or $150 or wherever it is. And at least it's going to work. So I think for that, it was a great device that really had a very clear purpose, in that it was we're bringing some quality to the low end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think in that it was absolutely nailed it. And it's one of the rare times where I feel the Surface team actually looked at the market and be like, can we actually fill a niche here with something that actually fully makes sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely give the Surface Go an A.
It also had
Yeah.
LTE, which I know Dan loves, and that was really nice. I know the Surface 3 did as well, but this
Yeah.
I think this had LTE at launch, or was there also a delay?
No, there was a delay, but
There's
I
always a
think it was
delay.
only like 4 months or something
Yeah.
like that. It was a faster turnaround because I remember pointing it out.
Yeah, I absolutely love the Surface Go. I would use this was my PC for trade shows. You know, you remembered me, Dan. I would type on this thing in like the media press room at Build or Ignite. This was like, it's just so easy to carry. It's so light. It's so small. It's a great portable PC. I definitely think it's an A as well. So let's stick that there. What is next? We have the Surface Go, then we have the Surface Studio 2. So the Surface Studio 2 launched on October 2nd, 2018, and it launched with a 7th gen Intel Core i7 processor, up to 32 gigs of RAM and up to 2 terabytes of SSD storage. They finally scrapped the hybrid drive. It had a GTX 1060 or 1070 GPU as options, and that I think are the only notable real changes with the Surface Studio 2. It had a USB-C port on the back, but it wasn't Thunderbolt, and you still couldn't use the display as an external, as an external display for other devices. So, Dan, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I may still give it a C. I think that's why we gave the first one. They definitely improved it.
Yeah.
There's no argument there. The switch to SSD helped a lot. It was a little bit faster, a little bit better GPU. You could do more with it. We still use it. We still have it in the next room. It's still being used every day. That display is still incredible. It's still a great computer, but it still has a lot of the same issues of the super high price, very niche target audience, and the improvements, I don't think, were enough to necessarily change anything for anyone. What happened to our live stream?
It's
like
just still be
melty.
up.
I mean, it's my computer.
Maybe. No one's complaining in the chat. Jazz, what are your thoughts on the Surface Studio 2?
Again, it's kind of like the Surface Studio 2 didn't move the needle for how I feel about Surface Studio as a line. Like, I was just like, they fixed they fixed problems they created themselves, with the hybrid drive or whatever. So, I'll defer to you guys on that, because I was just like, from the first one, I was just like, I know this device isn't for me, and I'm not even going to try and figure out who it's for. So,
yeah,
that's on you guys.
Yeah, you're right, Dan. The stream is melting. I don't know why.
Something's overheating.
Yeah, it's just not. Hang on, let me see if I can try and fix this. I might have to briefly stop the broadcast, so give me 1 second to see if this fixes it.
Didn't do anything to grow its market, I don't think. Like, I'm not sure they sold anymore. I'm not sure it did any more business or had any more converts. Now it seems to be better. Any more converts than what the first version did. And the fact that we haven't had a Surface Laptop Studio 3, even though we expect one
Surface,
to happen
not
eventually.
Laptop, just Surface Studio.
Sorry, Surface Studio 3. Yet tells me that they're going back to the drawing board and significantly rethinking this thing. So it's got to be a C.
Yeah, I think it's a C. I would maybe lean on a B, only because they did give it an SSD over the hybrid drive. That said,
you know why? Because that's expected over a generation improvement.
Right.
Like, you can't just be like, well, they made a second one faster. Like, that's always expected. So.
Yeah.
And they created that problem themselves. The first
did.
one should have had an SSD.
Totally
so you can't give them props for fixing a problem they made.
Yes.
This device is an F.
Give
it an F.
The Studio 2 has a special. I'm using the Surface Studio 2 right now, and it works most of the time. So yeah, well, I'm fine with giving it a C.
Oh, guys, the stream is breaking. It works most of the time. Are you streaming off the Surface laptop, Surface Studio?
Yes, the Studio 2. It works. It's
there
working.
You go.
It's
fine.
Let's not dwell.
I almost want to send him a desktop PC just to.
All right, what's next?
My laser blade is fine. It works completely well. I need to de-dust it though. I think it's getting a bit dusty inside.
Well,
now.
the Surface, your Razor's not on this list, so. All right, up next is the Pro 6, which launched on October 16, 2018, so the same sort of event as the Surface Studio 2 was announced. This had an 8th gen Intel Core i5 or i7 up to 16 gigs of RAM, and up to 1 terabyte of SSD storage. This is a very minor iterative upgrade over the Pro 5.
Yeah.
The design is the same. The only real change to the externally was that they introduced a black model, sort of echoing back to the Surface Pro 1 and Pro 2 days. But yeah, all of the sort of big changes were on the inside. It went from a dual core to a quad core, which was a big deal for performance. But that's pretty much it. What are your thoughts on this, Dan?
Whatever we gave the last version is going to get the same score here. I mean, maybe even, well, I don't know if it's worse. I mean, yeah, so all that's different was the Intel 8th Gen, black color scheme. They got rid of the 4 gig model, and now it's only 8 gigs, but it starts at $899. They got rid of the M3, and it starts at a Core i5 now.
Right.
So very iterative, you know.
Yeah, but it is better than the Pro 5, right? Is this S tier? This might be an S tier Surface Pro. Because this is the penultimate, this is the best of this form factor, I think. I think the Pro 7 starts to suffer in the battery department a bit more. The Pro 6 was sort of okay with an 8th gen. It didn't overheat, I don't remember. It didn't really overheat as much. I don't know, I think this may be S tier. The first S tier.
Yeah, still no Type-C, no LTE option.
Oh, you're right, no Type-C. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, so no, I think we got to save the S tier for the Pro 8 maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right. So Jez, what do you think? A tier?
Which one's this?
Pro 6.
The first black one.
Yeah, again.
Well, the return to black.
Yeah, I give this a B.
Why B?
Because it's black.
Oh.
But we gave the previous one an
laptops... Huh?
But we gave the previous one an A.
Oh, right, yeah, give it an A then. No, actually, give it an S, because it's black.
Yeah.
Give it an A.
It's going A, yeah. I think it's acceptable. It was certainly slightly better than the Pro 5, but it wasn't a huge leap forward for anything other than going from dual core to quad core. But everything really got that upgrade, right? Because Intel was able to fit 4 cores into things that previously were dual core designs. So, yep, A tier for the Pro 6 I think makes perfect sense. Moving on, we have the Surface Laptop 2. I think this is going to be the same story as the Laptop 1, right? There were no real downgrades here with the Surface Laptop 2. Had an 8th gen chip in it, so quad core up from dual core up to 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte of SSD storage again. And that really is the only change, right? I don't think there are any other changes to this product other than a simple spec refresh. Oh, there was a new matte black option. I guess this was the year of introducing black as a color.
Sorry, what was this for? Surface Laptop?
Laptop 2, yeah.
2. Yeah, I don't really have much thoughts on this one. I think it was just another iterative upgrade. Yeah. I didn't care about black as much. But I don't think they introduced really any major new technology or any thing that really pushed it forward. It was just a nice option. Is this when they introduced a 15-inch?
No, that's not it. That's not yet.
Yeah, so... Oh, yeah, in fact, so I'm just thinking of my own review. Small enhancements make a big difference. Let's see, what's new? Oh, same thing. Intel 8th Gen, black color scheme. Yeah, so whatever it was from the last one.
Yeah.
They also got rid of 4 gigs and just go to 8 gigs with a Core i5. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, the entry-level models for both Pro 6 and the Laptop 2 were better than what they were the year before. So, yeah, I think it's worth A for that as well. These certainly weren't poor products by any means.
Yeah, no step backs.
Up next is the Surface Pro 7. So yes, there wasn't much between the Pro 6 and the Pro 7, I guess. Pro 7, again, another very minor updates for the Surface Pro line. This was
actually. Do you want me to read off the changes? There were quite a few.
Yeah, go for it.
So there was a USB Type-C.
Yes.
3.1. So that was big. Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.0. Change from Marvell to Intel wireless. That's was
a big
significant.
Deal. Yeah.
Because that Marvell Wi-Fi was very problematic for the Surface line up to this point. Instant on, so it never hibernates. 10th gen Intel processor, Iris Plus graphics, that was actually a boost. DDR4 RAM, Surface Connect Plus with fast charge, dual far-field studio mics, and a new color type cover. Poppy red and ice blue. Yeah, they really went hardcore red that year with the pen and the keyboard.
They did.
That was a, again, it was technically iterative, but finally going to Type-C. So I would still give this an A, I guess,
Yeah, I think it is an A as well. There's no real, because it's not Thunderbolt still, right? It's just USB-C.
No.
Thunderbolt didn't come till later. So until it gets... Nothing's S tier unless it has Thunderbolt, I think. So,
right.
but yeah, I think... Where are we? Surface Pro 7. Yep, Surface Pro 7 is certainly an A. It wasn't poor. I guess, well... I remember people complaining about battery life more so on the Pro 7 with the 10th gen chip. Is that worth dropping down to a B? I don't think so.
I don't know. It's pretty hard to... I don't know what I have if I had for the battery life, but yeah, let's just keep it at an A.
We'll keep it at an A. Unless Jez has any thoughts.
No, I completely missed this one, fortunately. But,
it was a minor change.
When they... That sort of the Surface Pro 6 and 7, like when they started making them in black again, that was when I started getting more interested in them again, just because they're black. And, color's important, man.
Yeah,
color's important. Like,
Zach, you are right.
If you're listening, accent colors, Surface Duo. But but I think like they look really cool in black, and it caught my eye, and I was like, yeah, they look really cool, and they were sort of getting towards that point where they were solving some of the issues that I had with it, and
yeah,
I'll defer to you guys again.
Zach, you were right. Even my review, my results pegged Surface Pro 7 with a Core i5 at 8 hours. That's not bad, but the Surface Pro 6 with a Core i5 was closer to 10 hours, so it was a step back in battery life.
I'm going to move it to a B. I think it is a B. It's almost because the Pro 6 did have better battery life, I think, and the performance increases over the 6th and the 7th weren't huge, so I don't know if it was worth the 2 hours less battery. So unless you have any strong thoughts, I think B tier for the Pro 7.
Yep.
All right, up next is the Surface Laptop 3. This was the first Surface laptop which had a 15-inch variant. This was 10th gen Intel. It was Core i5 or Core i7. i7 only in the 15-inch, I believe. But it was also the first AMD Surface. So we had AMD Ryzen 5 and AMD Ryzen 7 options in the 15-inch variant. This was also the first Surface laptop to have... metal keyboard decks in addition to Alcantara, so there were quite a few changes with the Laptop 3. Also had USB-C, no Thunderbolt though, but it was a USB-C port in place of the display port, I think it was, on the Laptop 2 and the Laptop 1. I loved this device. I thought the Laptop 3 was great. That said, the AMD variants were a bit of a letdown, I remember, in reviews especially, and it was the reason why I went with the Surface Laptop 3 for business, because the business models had the Intel chips, and the Intel chips at the time were just better than the AMD Ryzens. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Solid C.
Yeah, you think?
Yep. I didn't really care for the 15-inch. I'm not saying they shouldn't do the 15-inch. I'm fine with options. Even though it's not for me, if someone wants the 15-inch version, knock yourself out. This is when they started moving away from Alcantara and started going with the keyboard decks. They still offer it as an option, which is fine, and I get the complaints with Alcantara, totally do. So I'm fine with the option, but I also think the Alcantara is one of the biggest selling points of this. They did a good job with the metal, though. They still retain when you close it. It's still quiet, and it has all those kind of benefits. The AMD chip in the 15-inch, did it no favors compared to the Intel version. And there was just not a lot here that was really that exciting. But if you love the 15-inch, that's fine. But the execution here wasn't great, so I'm going to go with a C on that.
Jez?
Sorry, which device was this?
Laptops.
I was a bit distracted by some information dropping in my DM.
Laptop 3.
Laptop 3. Again, I also missed this, so I'm going to have to defer to you guys.
Yeah, I think C is probably fair. The AMD one really was a letdown, and having to shell out for the business model, which was $100 or $150 more just because of the version of Windows it comes with, wasn't my favorite thing. And because there were lots of weird choices. It had no Thunderbolt, which at this point, what were you doing, Microsoft? It should have Thunderbolt, and also the 50.
Oh, they couldn't do it because of AMD.
That's right. You got a good point. So AMD sucks even more. Let's just answer that. No. The other thing that really annoyed me about the Laptop 3 was that the 15-inch variant didn't have a bigger battery. It was the same size battery as the 13-inch, which I realized they did for weight reasons. But the 15-inch could have been a battery powerhouse, and it just wasn't because it had the same battery as the 13-inch, but was powering a larger, higher resolution display. So it was technically probably had worse battery life. So yeah, C tier I think is totally acceptable for the Laptop 3. Up next is the Surface Pro X. This is going to be an interesting one. So the Surface Pro X was announced in 2019 alongside the Laptop 3 and the Pro 7, but this was announced as a sort of a forward-looking version of the Surface Pro. It was thinner with a larger display and thinner bezels. It had a 13-inch display size. It had two USB-C ports. It had a removable SSD, I believe, and it was the first sort of major design change to the Surface Pro line since the Surface Pro 3, Pro 4 era. On the inside, it was powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8cx custom chip known as the SQ1, 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, and up to 512 gigs of SSD storage on the inside. It was only available in black and only had a black type cover color accessory, though it did have a new Surface Slim Pen as well. That was also in black. What are your thoughts on this? This is, I think, a mixed bag for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I like to give it an A just because of the design. But, you know, the actual reality of it's definitely, I think even being given a B is being generous. But it wasn't necessarily their fault. Again, they decided to create this device with a processor that was supplied by Qualcomm, and they tweaked it a little bit. But, you know, should they be at fault for the performance which they pushed to the max? And it was the fastest ARM device at the time. Like, it really was faster than any HCX device. Not by a ton, but it technically was. So I get the performance for some people wasn't great, but I enjoyed it tremendously. And, like, the display was great. The audio was great. The front-facing camera was one of the best of any device I had used up to that point. The keyboard was great. I liked the pen and inking. The battery life was nice. Finally, you can get, like, really... You know, it was about 2 hours longer than a Pro, which wasn't like a huge difference, but 2 hours is make or break for an all-day device.
Yeah.
And because of that, I really, really like this device. I guess we'll give it a B.
Yeah, I'm leaning on B, maybe A. It was so thin, I remember as well. It was such a thin, like, compared to the Surface Pro, the main Surface Pro, and even like previous Surface Pros, it was super thin. It was beautiful. The only real downside to its design is that the coating they used for the paint was so fingerprinty. Just look at it, and it'll give it, just fingerprints would form. I'm going to lean on B. I think B is good. And Jez, did you have an experience with this, or are you deferring to us again?
Which one's this? The Pro X.
Pro X.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have one. I have a Pro X.
Okay.
Surprisingly enough.
Do you like it?
I can't remember why I bought one. Actually, I think I bought it secondhand. I got a really good deal on one. I got it for like 250 quid.
That's not
without
bad,
a keyboard. And I was like, wow, and a pen. And I was like, man, someone, like, it was on eBay, and I think like people just either don't know what this device is or how much value they're losing by selling it me for this. But I was like, I'll take it, you know. I think like because I was at the time I was getting back into drawing again because I sort of dabble in digital art, if you can call it that. I sort of dabble, you know, and I got like a Galaxy Fold, and I got a Galaxy Fold pen, and I try and use it, but you can sort of do vague sketches on the Galaxy Fold, but it's not a particularly great experience. So like I was thinking like I'll get a Pro X because I am getting a really good deal on it, and B, it's a good drawing tablet, right? So I did get a Pro X, and I have used it a fair bit. I was really impressed. Because I'd seen all the YouTube videos out there, like saying the performance is terrible and stuff. But honestly, like I thought the performance was really good for what it is. At least like I got it like a few months ago, so I don't know if there's like been major updates.
There has been.
I got it, and I put Windows 11 straight on it, and I just really loved the performance and everything about it, and the battery life was great. And I think you remember earlier I mentioned that I bought my mom like a cheap Chinese laptop that died after a couple of weeks. Well, I ended up like, you know, I got back into digital art, but then I sort of like I just don't have time. So in the end I gave my mom the Surface Pro X, and she uses it all the time.
Nice.
And she loves it, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm inclined to give this an A just because like it's got my mom on a, you know, because before this, she was using like a PC that I think was like Windows 7. Yeah, it was a Windows 7 laptop that was literally, if it was a horse, you'd have taken it out the back of the farm and shot it and put it out of its misery. It was that old and sickly, like there's computer viruses on that laptop that are hitherto unknown to science. You know, so yeah, but she went. There's a pretty big upgrade. You know.
Yeah.
So she loves it. So I'm gonna give it an A for sentimental reasons. Also because like we talk about like innovation. And Microsoft, you know, I'm going to use that metaphor again, putting the canary in the mine. You know, I think the Surface Pro X is kind of like that for like bringing. It's almost like full circle, right? Because they started with the ARM with RT, and then they've come all the way back around, and they're giving it another proper go. And they had to make this device. They had to make this device so they could learn from it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give it an A for bringing back the ARM dream. And coming back, giving it another go, and sort of pushing out some innovation with it too, like the swappable hard. This one has a swappable hard drive, right?
It does.
Or
Yeah.
I'm not going. Yeah.
And
so I'm going to give it an A.
Yeah, I mean, I can. First of all, I just love how Jesse calls it ARM. It's ARM. It's just called ARM. They'll call it ARM.
But it's all in capital letters.
But it's not an abbreviation. It's not an abbreviation.
Why is it in
anyway.
caps then?
Because it's just a branding thing. Because there's ARM Limited, capital A, small r, lower m, Limited. They're the company that designs the chips, and then the chips themselves are called ARM.
But
anyway.
But it's like, it confuses me because you got IBM, and then that's
I get it.
And then you got
it's just called ARM. You don't need to say ARM. But this also had the slim pen, which fit into the keyboard dock. So that was amazing. Had the super thin bezels, great camera. Yeah, and I was very nuanced. Yeah, I was very nuanced in my review. I said, like, for the right person, this is an awesome device. Yeah. But if you want to do gaming or hardcore stuff, you're not going to enjoy it at all. So for me, I ended up using this as, like, my regular device for a very long time. So, yeah, I can go for an A.
I would say it launched as a C, but with software updates and firmware updates over the last couple of years, especially with Windows 11, it's an A now. Because you've got to remember, when it launched, it was only compatible with 32-bit emulated apps or native ARM64, of course. So there was a whole chunk of Windows applications that weren't
even
supported.
Edge.
Yeah, exactly.
Edge
even Edge wasn't
compiled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it took a long time. Even like to this day, it's still not perfect. But this year, I think, is the first year we've really started to see the ball rolling with Windows on ARM, and it is benefiting the old Surface Pro X because that SQ1 is pretty good, and the only reason it was poorly received was because it was running most apps in emulation mode. As more apps get compiled natively for ARM, that performance is going to improve, that battery life is going to get better. So yeah, I think this is an A now. Today, as we're ranking it, I think it's an A. And that's where I'm going to put it. So that's the Surface Pro X. So the Surface Neo and Surface Duo were both announced at this event. We're not going to talk about the Neo because it never came out. But we will talk about the Duo here. The Surface Duo, give me a sec to find it. The Surface Duo was Microsoft's first Android smartphone, I guess. It has two 5.6-inch displays joined together by a 360-degree hinge. It shipped with a Qualcomm Snapdragon 855, 6 gigabytes of RAM, and 128 or 256 gigs of storage on the inside. Had a 3,577 milliamp hour battery and a single 11 megapixel front-facing camera. What are your thoughts on this? This is going to be an interesting discussion, I think.
I mean, the concept behind it is an A.
Yes.
Maybe even an S. But the execution of it is a C.
It's so disappointing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Surface Duo. I used the first one as my main phone for a whole year before the Duo 2 came out, and then I used that. I love this. I loved it even through all its flaws. Android 10 was absolutely terrible on this thing. The camera has never been good and likely never will be good at this point. But the form factor, how thin it is, how much screen you get for how thin it is just insane. Yeah. And we've said this on the podcast many times. Even compared to the Duo 2, the Duo 1 just feels like something else. It's something special. And from a design perspective, I agree. I think this is maybe an S. But as a product, as a complete package, it's no more than a B. I think B's pushing it. I think C is probably more. I
was going to say a B's very generous. That's like what we talk about metaphors, right?
Yeah.
I got a new one.
Okay.
The metaphor, like A face only a mother could love.
Oh.
That's kind of like the love Zach has for the Surface Duo. Like, we wanted this device for so long, and you just want it. You want it to be better than it is, you know.
Well, I think with software updates, it is in a much better place today. You know, there's no longer any real software bug issues. From a stability perspective on the software side, it's fine. The camera's still terrible. There's no NFC, so you can't do tap to pay and stuff. And did I mention the camera? The camera's still terrible, and the haptics on the inside are pretty poor as well. But everything else, I think, is perfectly fine. And for the price you have paid for these days, because you still buy these new from Microsoft for I think $600-700/pounds. I'm sticking with B. I'm going with B.
No, I'm going to C. Because even the Type-C port would break a lot. Like there was like that. Right. The Type-C port breaking was pretty bad. Like I said, conceptually and the actual like design of it is an A or even an S tier. It really is. But the reality of it, the execution with the software and the camera and Android and everything, it's C, and I would say C. Now, like today, with all their support has been really good. They really did improve it a lot, but even still, you know, it is now 2022, and you can't be like the Snapdragon 850 now is pretty solid. It's like it doesn't even have 5G, right? So it's like it's at best to see.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about the 5G. Yeah, you're right. It did launch with specs that were a year old.
Not even NFC, you know?
No NFC. Yeah, fine. It's a C. I'm very sad about it, but it's a C.
That's full cap in there, man.
This has a special place.
That's right. Like,
yeah, he's right. I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing.
It's special. It's so special. It's like, I can't believe how solid the hinge is. Like, you compare the hardware on this, right? Like, not the hardware necessarily, but like the elegance, right?
Yeah.
This is a Galaxy Fold, right?
Yeah.
It's got a horrible crease down the middle. It's got this nasty plasticky screen, right? But I have to use this because it is simply better than this. This like feels better in the hand in every way. It feels more solid. It feels more stable. This feels like I'll look at it wrong one day and the screen will crack. It feels that fragile. I took this to the beach and it literally says in the manual, "Don't take this to the beach. It will break."
Yeah.
And like when I was like, I'll just be careful. I'll take it to the beach and I'll just be careful, right? But like, they see the hinge, right? It's got these tiny little brushes in it, right? Which I don't know if a lot of people know. I don't know if you can see that there.
Yeah.
It's got these tiny little brushes in it. And I didn't like drop it on the floor or anything. It was just sand blowing around in the wind that you don't even really realize. I remember like taking it out and unfolding it, and it just went because it was all the sand crashing in the hinge. And I was like, oh my god, the ambience at the beach is gonna break this phone. I was that worried about it. So, you know, it's Microsoft, like, with the form factor is right. Like, I will never use a phone that doesn't fold into a tablet. I'll never use it again. I'll put it with every bit of fragility in this phone. But the fact that I can fold it out into a tablet is so good for productivity and gaming, frankly. Like, xCloud on this is amazing. But the hardware, like, the feel of this is just so much better. Like, it's so much nicer, which makes me understand why it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
I really need them to nail everything. I need a Surface Pro 3 or a Surface Pro 8 of this phone.
Yeah.
So if they can stick with it for 8 versions, great.
No, 3 versions.
Yeah.
I need accent colors.
Yes.
If you're watching, this needs accent colors. It won't work if you don't have accent colors. Nobody wants a blue phone. Nobody. Except Zach.
I don't want a blue phone. I just don't care. Anyway, there you go. C grade for the original Surface Duo. That makes me really sad, but I think it's probably fair. Moving on, next up is Surface Go 2. Surface Go 2 was announced in May 2020. And is a minor upgrade over the original Surface Go. There were a few notable changes with this, though. We can start with the display. The display increased in size from 10 inches to 10.5, reducing the bezels around the sides ever so slightly. They also introduced a Intel Core M3 option, 8th gen, in addition to the Intel Pentium, which was a 4425Y. There was also the Intel Core M3 8100Y. Everything else is basically the same. So what are our thoughts on this? I think this is a better Surface Go. I don't think there's anything worse about it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, like we gave the last one an A.
Yeah.
So I think this is a solid A. Yeah, it's definitely better, and may want to be like, oh, S tier, but at the same time, you do expect every generation things will improve.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's exactly what we got here. Minor improvements.
It's not groundbreaking anyway. Jez, any thoughts on that, or is A perfectly fine?
I didn't use it, so I sounds good to me.
Yeah, it's an A, I think. There's nothing wrong with it. Next is Surface Book 3. Now, I have some thoughts on the Surface Book 3. This was the third generation. Let me pull up the info I have on it here. Give me one sec. I've lost it. There it is. Surface Book 3 was launched in May 2020 as well. Both as same as last year. There's Book 2, 15-inch and 30.5-inch variants. The big changes were that they upgraded to a 10th gen Intel chip over the 8th gen in the Book 2, and they also upgraded the GPU from the 10 series to the 1650 and 1660 series. I don't like the Surface Book 3 because at this point in my sort of workflow life, I was starting to push the limits of the Surface Book, and I bought a Surface Book, top spec Surface Book 3. It was the first time I'd ever put money down for a Surface with 32 gigs of RAM. I was going all in, and it couldn't even do the live stream. It couldn't do the Windows Central podcast we do every Friday. It would crash, it would hang, it would overheat. It was a severe letdown for me. This is probably the Surface that let me down the most out of all of the services I've ever used, because I guess my workflow was just finally outgrowing it, and that made me really sad. So I'm giving this a C. Any thoughts, Dan?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. In fact, I wrote at the time, enthusiasm around Surface Book 3 has been tempered compared to previous Surface devices. Yeah. With a design going on 5 years old, it is easy to look at the under-the-hood changes with some disappointment. At the very least, some advancements around the display color accuracy, HDR, anti-reflective coating, or in a larger trackpad would have gone a long way to keeping Surface Book 3 fresher in 2020. My only real advancements, or pros for this was there's nothing else like it on the market, and if you need a device to do what this does, this is the best version of it. But it was very iterative and didn't push it forward. And you're right, in terms of the performance, they were just I think finally hitting the wall, and how hard they could push this thing with that, putting the CPU, the RAM, and the SSD all behind a relatively thin display, and having a vertical cooling system. You can only do so much. And this didn't have Thunderbolt 3 or 4, just had a USB Type-C. And again, you're putting this much money out for a device in 2020, that's getting kind of, So I agree with that. C is fine.
Jez, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think C. I mean, I totally bounced off the book line at this point. Yeah. I was just like, this form factor makes no sense. Putting all this tech in the display, making it really hot. You could set like the whole meme around frying an egg actually holds true with the Surface devices. Like it's one of the few sort of stereotypes about tech. People talk about gaming laptops. I don't think I could fry an egg on my Razer Blade, but I could genuinely fry an egg on the Surface Book.
Yeah, it screen. Did overheat. It did throttle a lot. You're right.
And this was
the fact
2
that
years.
They've dropped the. Yeah.
Say again. Sorry, Dan.
This was 2 years between the versions.
Yeah, and this is proof that you can't just coast, because technology will move forward, and you need to adapt your designs to support that. And Microsoft just didn't, and it really showed with the Book 3, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so Book 3 is a C-tier device. What is next? We have the Surface Pro X SQ2. I think this is about the same as what the other one was. I'm not going to sort of dwell on that too much. Then we have the Surface Laptop Go. Surface Laptop Go was announced and launched in October 2020. This was the sort of first version of the Surface laptop that was designed to be cheaper, similar to the original Surface Go. It had a 12.5-inch display with 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, an Intel Core i5 10th generation chip, and up to 256 gigs of storage, though the entry-level model had 64 gigs of eMMC storage. This is an interesting device. I do like it, but I can see why it got a lot of flack in reviews. The display itself, the resolution is super low. I think it's the lowest of any Surface. It's a 1536 by 1024 display, so it's not even sort of retina quality or whatever you'd call it, pixels. Microsoft calls it a pixel sense display, but from a quality perspective, it's certainly that the PPI isn't high on it at all. It does support touch, but it doesn't have pen, which I don't think is a miss for a device like this. That's totally fine. The Intel Core i5 is perfectly fine as well, but the eMMC storage and the 4 gigs of RAM, I think, were a big concern for a lot of people. Dan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I gotta still give this an A though, because
really, wow.
No, I have to, because it's about the comparing it to other laptops in this price category, and for that price that you're getting for this thing. You know, there are cheaper laptops, just like every Surface. There's always something that's going to be more affordable that does more than the Surface. That's always going to be the case. And that's the same here. You can call it the Surface tax or whatever. But the quality of this device, there's no $590 or $549 laptop I've ever picked up that I was like, wow, this thing is really nice. And Surface Laptop Go is a really nice laptop. It has that premium metal finish on the lid and the keyboard deck, and then with the polycarbonate on the bottom, which looked really nice and also kept the device cool. It came in different colors. The keyboard was great. The front-facing camera is very good on it. The audio is good as well. There's just a lot about this device. Now, it's not for everyone, but for $550, like I said, I think it's a really solid device for the right audience, and I think they did a really great job with it.
Yeah, but it's missing a backlit keyboard.
Yeah, but again, I don't think that's a deal breaker. That's definitely a criticism, and I pointed that out. But for $550, like one of the reasons why it gets really good battery life, or pretty good battery life, I should say. This another problem with all Surface devices is because it doesn't have the backlighting on it. But like for the target audience, I'm not sure like that's a big deal. I don't know. It's definitely a criticism, but you know, I challenge you to point out another laptop that's this small and portable, that's this level quality. So
yeah, I think the other downside for me is that it doesn't have facial recognition. It has fingerprint in the higher tiers, but there's no facial recognition on any of them. And when you're paying $699, $799 for those ones with 8 gigs of RAM and stuff, that to me is a bit of a miss. But I guess not everybody sort of cares about face recognition on their laptop. Jazz, what are your thoughts? Where do you think the Laptop Go comes?
Laptop Go. Now, I've got a Laptop Go. At home sent to us by our illustrious parent company, but I haven't really used one or anything, or haven't really researched it, so I'm gonna have to defer to you guys, I think.
I'm leaning on B. I know you think it's an A. Is it an A? Fine, it's an A. We'll give it an
A. I think I don't know. There's, like I said, it's not for everyone, but considering its price and the quality, I think it does exactly what it was supposed to do, which is a more affordable, smaller Surface laptop.
Yeah.
Like, I wish it had a backlit keyboard, but I didn't find myself like not wanting to use it because of that. The only reason I would not use a Surface Laptop Go is because it's a small display device. You know, it's like, you know, I'd rather use maybe a 14 or 15-inch display, but it's not because of the keyboard not being backlit. And I just think it just looks awesome.
Sure. Okay. Up next is the Surface Pro 7 Plus. So this was a sort of enterprise-only product that launched in January 2021, and it was a refresh of the Surface Pro 7. The only real notable changes with it was that on the outside it had an upgradable SSD now. LTE model, the Pro 7 and the Pro 6 didn't have LTE models, so the Pro 7 Plus brought that back.
Yep.
And it also had an Intel 11th gen chip on the inside, which was notable because that actually brought improvements to the GPU department. It specifically had Intel Iris Xe graphics, so it could actually do a little bit of light gaming as well. What are your thoughts on this, Dan?
Yeah, I like this a lot. I mean, granted, this was a holdover device, and this was to really lock in for business and enterprise, because at the time I was like, oh, I think they're doing this because they're going to radically change Surface Pro.
Yeah.
And they still want, and it's been a long time since they upgraded to Surface Pro 7 at the time. So they did this to put in the latest stuff that they could with a device that would still work with like the Surface dock.
Yeah.
And all the existing accessories out there, but still be modern. So it got LTE. It has a larger battery. It got longer battery life. Intel 11th Gen, Iris Xe graphics option. I put the 4G already. Removable SSD, and you can get up to 32 gigs of RAM.
Yeah.
So even a consumer, I actually really like using this device. It's hard to use now because of Surface Pro 8s, but I think for what they were trying to do, as like, all right, we're going to lock this in for our commercial customers, and this will be good for another 2 to 3 years at least. I thought it was a great device.
Yeah. I think this is probably an A then. It's certainly better than the standard Pro 7. They did increase the battery a bit, which did help the battery life problems slightly. Jez, any thoughts on the Pro 7 Plus?
I don't want to give it an A just because it's boring. I think it's I think
but it's a business.
It's
a business device, right?
Yeah, it's like, hang on a sec. Service device is supposed to be exciting, and you give me a plus? Come on.
Well, like I said, it's for business, but this is literally for business. That was the
business edition then, or something.
Well, they kind of did.
Like
it was only sold through business channels initially.
You couldn't buy it as a consumer. Well, you could technically buy it as a consumer, but it wasn't on the main Microsoft Store website yet to go through the business channel. I still think it's an A though, because it certainly was a better Surface Pro 7. There's nothing worse about it. So
like I said, like if you gave this device to a Surface Pro 7 user, they would have been like, "Oh, this is better in every way."
I think so.
There's still room for improvement, but longer battery life, better performance. I mean, LTE, all that stuff was a big improvement.
Yeah, I agree. All right, up next is the Surface Laptop 4. Now, I personally think this is an S-tier device. They fixed the AMD issue. It had a good AMD chip this time around. The Intel was the 11th gen, so the Iris Xe graphics were great on it. The launch price was the same, I want to say, $999 for the 13.5 inch, which now had AMD in addition to Intel, and then the 15 inch was $1299 and up. Had up to 1 terabyte of storage, up to 32 gigs of RAM, which I think was the first time the laptop got that. I think this is an S tier, unless anybody has any strong thoughts on this.
No, I think I agree. I mean, there's still things I would still love an LTE version, of course. Sure. More ports or something like that, or a full HD camera. But yeah, I mean, I actually use now the 13.5 inch version with Alcantara, and it's one of my favorite devices to use. So
yeah, the battery life on it's good. It has Thunderbolt. They finally put Thunderbolt on it, and yeah, I can't complain about it really. It's nice. Jez, any thoughts on the laptop 4?
I mean, I defer to you guys again, but it sounds like if I ever got fired, for example, and like xCloud ever got so good that I didn't need local hardware, and I was retired, this Surface Laptop 4 is the kind of device that I get, right?
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't need a tablet at that point. I wouldn't need a GPU. It's just like the quintessential reliable, solid laptop that maybe can push a little bit further if you ever want to be creative and stuff like that. And it has all the features you need to sort of use it as a full-blown, laptop. So
yeah,
I'm not against the S tier ranking if you guys think that's...
Yeah, I think this is our first S tier Surface. It basically is perfect. The only criticism I have is that the 15 inch still doesn't have a bigger battery, and I wouldn't be so annoyed if they put in some kind of discrete or dedicated graphics. But I think the 13.5 inch Surface Laptop 4 is perfect. I don't think there's any problems with it. There's no issues with it. I think it's S tier. I really do. All right. Now up next is Surface Go 3. I think this is the same story as the Surface Go 2, right? They upgraded from an Intel Pentium Gold 6500Y. They upgraded from the Pentium Gold 4425Y to a 6500Y, which actually was quite a big bump in performance. They also upgraded.
No, it wasn't. Wait, for that one it was.
Over the gold one it was,
over
the Pentium. The i3 model, which went from a 8th gen to a 10th gen, that wasn't a huge upgrade. Right. Very minor performance improvements there. Still base eMMC storage with 64 gigs or SSD up to 256 gigs. And it's the same design, same screen size, nothing else really changed with this. I think this certainly isn't worse than the Surface Go 2, but I don't think it's much better than the Surface Go 2.
It's definitely not better. What did we give the Go 2 an A?
Yeah, both A's.
I'm always going to give this a B because it was so boring I didn't review it. And I feel bad for not reviewing it because they did send me one. But there was just like like, because they sent me the top tier model,
Yeah.
you know, one of the top tiers, and there's just literally no difference. I could just be like, just read my Surface Go 2 review, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, I almost want to give it a step down because I don't know, improve the screen a little bit, make the camera a little bit better. Give me something.
I
The
agree.
audio is now significantly better.
I'm gonna say if they had put an ARM chip in this, I would have given it an A. But because they decided
Yeah.
to literally basically do nothing, it's not worth an A anymore. It's dropping to a B. Because at least with the Go 2, they increased the screen size. They actually put the M3 in, which was a big step up from the Pentium. Now with this, it's like the performance gains are barely anything really, and the screen size is the same. No real changes to the external design. I think this is a B. Jez, any thoughts?
Nah, I defer to you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that it doesn't innovate definitely doesn't warrant giving it the same score.
Yeah.
You know, if you like, you know, if you put a number on it and it doesn't feel any different, that's kind of a fail, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they should have called it the Go 2 Plus.
Maybe.
Like
Genuinely, maybe, yeah. Right, up next is the one of the ones we've all been waiting for, I think. Surface Pro 8. I actually have one here. Pro 8 is the first mainline Surface Pro since the Pro 3/4 to adopt a new design. It is adopting the same design that was unveiled with the Surface Pro X, albeit slightly thicker because they needed to make room for grills and a fan. On the inside, it has an 11th gen Intel Core i3, i5, or i7, up to 32 gigs of RAM, up to 1 terabyte of SSD storage. Has the same same size 13-inch display as the Pro X, except it's been updated with 120 Hertz, which is a huge deal, I think, personally. It has Iris Xe on the inside, and basically that's it. Oh, I get the whole thing's a redesign, but I'm not going to list the whole spec sheet here. What are your thoughts on this, Dan?
That's S tier. I mean, this is
Yeah.
the most perfect Surface Pro 8. This is a big redesign. They finally addressed the thick bezels. They gave us a larger, higher resolution display. You got the slim pen, which fits into the carousel now, so you never lose your pen. The performance has been great on it. The fans are quiet. Like, it's just it is literally the most perfect. It could be better, of course it can, right? Yeah, it could always have more performance. You could always have more battery life. They even came out with an LTE version, right? So, like, this thing's got everything I want. It's the best at which they can kind of do with today's processors, which is the only thing that holds it back. But in terms of design and just enjoyability of using it, and it didn't have really any like software issues, right? It's just been out of the park, and it's everything I've ever wanted in a Surface Pro.
It has Thunderbolt as well, which is like, and the Slim Pen 2 has the haptics in it, which is only compatible with Pro 8 and the Laptop Studio, I think, which is a nice addition as well. Jez, sorry, go on.
And they also fixed the black, right? Because they used a different material for this, so there's no fingerprints.
Yeah, it's
so
fingerprint resistant, which I really do like. Jez, what are your thoughts?
Well, remember my story earlier about Surface Pro 4 being replaced by Microsoft for when we sent back the Frankenstein Surface Pro 3 repair.
Are you going to tell us you got a Pro 8 for like £300?
No. I bought Pro 8 brand new, full blown, I think we bought the mid-range one, the i5, because I'd learned, i7s, they get very, very hot, so I think we went for an i5 and got the Surface Slim Pen 2 and all that stuff. I bought it for my girlfriend for Christmas, and it's been amazing. Because I had for me, I haven't gone through the whole iterative process with Surface, so it was like, for me, that was jumping from a Surface Pro 4 to a Surface Pro 8. Can you imagine the delta in quality I was experiencing there? But it, my girlfriend, she'd use a Surface Pro 4 in bed, drawing and stuff on Photoshop, and she'd have to stop because the Pro 4 gets so hot physically, couldn't leave it on the bed anymore,
Yeah.
Because it literally burned her skin. It's not good. But Pro 8 is just a completely different experience. It's quiet. It runs cool using Photoshop, and she has so many layers in her projects on Photoshop. The Surface Pro 4 would just lag. It freeze up. It wouldn't even open some files. But this is it's a dream. She does 1080p video editing on it for work, social video, no problems. It really is the perfect service. It's like the culmination of a journey that sort of where the technology is caught up to what Microsoft really envisioned for this product, and from here it's only going to get better and better, I think. So yeah, it's S tier all the way, and the haptics in the pen are amazing, for drawing. They are really amazing. It really elevates the experience. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
Like, even as a casual dabbler in Sketchable and stuff, I'm by no means a digitalized, professionally, but I dabble, and it feels so nice, and it really does elevate the experience and making you feel like you're having that tactile, physical, medium. If you're used to drawing on paper, like it doesn't necessarily help you make art any better. It just sort of feels nicer, and it sort of elevates the experience. So
yeah,
I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and worth every penny. It's the first Surface I bought that I didn't have some sort of twinge of regret of how much they cost. So
yeah, there are a couple other things worth noting. This is the first mainline Surface Pro to move from magnesium to aluminium, or aluminum, which was, I guess, a design choice they made. They also, what was the other thing with the pen? Yeah, because the pen technology in the Surface Pros really didn't change much between the Pro 4 and the Pro 7 Plus. I think they increased the pressure levels and stuff between Pro 5 and 6 or whatever it was, but there was no real innovation in the pen technology. Because I remember lots of artists would complain about zigzagging when you would draw diagonal lines and stuff. The Pro 8 actually remedies that significantly with the Slim Pen 2 as well. So they actually did sort of, I guess they took a look at everything, every top down, and what can we improve, where can we improve, and they did it. And with the Pro 8, I think it is certainly an S tier device. It is certainly nothing less than an A tier, but I'm going with S tier here, yeah. Right, I think this is the last one. Have we done them all? Almost. We've got two more. We got the three more. We got the Surface Laptop Studio. I think this is an A. I don't think it's an S tier. I think there's still room for improvement for this form factor. It's certainly a big step up from the Surface Book, which it replaces. They finally put in competent CPUs and GPUs in here. They're good. I could get all of my workflow done on a Surface Laptop Studio. We should talk about it. The form factor does change over the Surface Book 3. It now has a 14.4-inch display, 120 Hz. The form factor, instead of the screen detaching, the screen can now pull forward and lay flat over the keyboard deck. The keyboard is amazing. I think it's the best Surface keyboard they've done ever, and the trackpad is larger, and it's also haptic based, so it's no longer physically moving. It uses haptics underneath to power the clicking sensation. Has an 11th gen H35 i5 11300 or i7 113070, up to 32 gigs of RAM and up to 2 terabytes of SSD storage, which can be replaced, albeit not really by the end user. Dan, what are your thoughts on the Laptop Studio?
I'm almost willing to go S tier on this, because out the gate for a version 1 device, they got so much right with it. Like, there really isn't like a fundamental flaw with the device. Now you could argue that it's not for everyone. Ches, again, it's not a gaming laptop. But for what they were going for, I think this is a much better design over Surface Book. But the new trackpad is great. The pen design is awesome, how it clicks underneath so you never lose it. The display is really nice. I know Zach's going to criticize the display not being a high resolution, but I think the display looks fantastic. I love the design. The front-facing camera is really nice on it. It does have Thunderbolt 4, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so it's got that. I mean, it doesn't have a ton of ports, but, I'll take Thunderbolt 4 for it. I don't know. I just really enjoy using this device, and there isn't a lot wrong with it. Like, I don't feel it's underpowered. For some people, it will be, right? But that's just always the name of the game with any laptop you buy. But I don't know. I'm curious about the sales. I don't know how the sales are there much better, if it's doing well or not. But I think they really nailed this out the gate. I think it's just a really great design.
Jez, what are your thoughts?
Which one is this? Sorry.
Laptop Studio.
Laptop Studio, yeah, of course. Now, Laptop Studio is the first Surface that I looked at and thought, I want to buy this for me.
And not only that, but you've had this thought on and off for about 6 months now.
Yeah. It's like, because I always look at my Razer Blade and like, I almost forget that I have it. And that's what the Surface team always talk about. They're like, we want the device to fade into the background. We want the device to fade into the background. Bullshit. Like nobody thinks about that when they've got a Surface. They look at it, they're like, wow, look at my device, it's so cool. They show it off in public. I see all you Surface people out there on the train, you know, showing off your Surface devices. I see you, you know. But when you got a Razer Blade, it's just like, yeah, it's a laptop, you know. And it works really well. And it's a reliable workhorse. But it doesn't really have that excitement and that flair that Surface has, even though Surface has made me really mad over the years. So the Surface Laptop Studio, I was like, that's what the Surface Book should have always been. And they should have just called it the Surface Book 4, but they didn't want to admit that the Surface Book was dumb. Because if they'd called it the Surface Book 4, they would have been like, yeah, we admit the detachable screen was dumb. You know, so they called it something else. And they gave it a dumb name. The Surface Laptop Studio should lose a grade just because of its name. It's a dumb name. So it's losing a grade just because of its name from me. But I haven't used one. So again, I feel kind of guilty ranking it. But honestly, I wouldn't give this an A. I'd give it a B purely because of the ports, man. Those ports are pathetic.
Yeah.
You know, you can't be out here in 2022 giving me 2 USB-C ports, you know, or a Thunderbolt. Is it Thunderbolt even? Is it USB-C?
Yeah, they are Thunderbolt, but you're right. There is only 2 USB ports.
So you're telling me I've got to use 2 powered docks to get even part of my setup that I have in my Razer Blade right now. I have a lot of stuff plugged in my Razer Blade. And yeah, Dan will be. I know Dan's thinking, just get a desktop. I can't just get a desktop. I got no space. For a desktop. So like my Razer Blade right now, I've got like a webcam plugged in. I've got like my headphones plugged in. I got a Stream Deck plugged in, a capture card plugged in. I have a bunch of stuff plugged into it, and I need a powered Thunderbolt dock in addition to all the Razer Blade ports to get my setup working. And like I was looking at the Surface Laptop Studio before I got this Razer Blade that I've got now to upgrade my Razer Blade 15, and I was thinking like, I physically cannot make this work. I physically can't make it work. Even if I bought 2 Thunderbolt docks, 2 powered Thunderbolt docks, adding 2 extra plugs into myself, I physically can't make this work, you know. So, but on that basis alone, I'm giving it a B because I think it's a cop-out. It's a cop-out not to give it more ports, okay?
I agree. I think you could
no
use
SD card reader
ports.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. I agree you could use more ports, but I think your setup is extreme. And I don't think, again, like the person looking to buy a laptop studio is you, or you're in your business, right? It's meant for a very different person. I guess I wouldn't mind another Type A or something on there, but yeah, you definitely need a dongle with it, unfortunately, if you want to use more than a Type C. But then again, I don't know. With Thunderbolt 4, you know, you can use an external Thunderbolt 4 drive. Like, I don't know. I don't plug a lot in there. I guess if you're using this as a desktop replacement, those ports are limiting. Yeah. If you're using this as a portable device, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I really don't. I don't see, you know, I don't know.
What's the battery life like on it?
It's good.
It's good.
It's not bad, yeah.
Is it book-like? Because that is one thing I do miss about the Surface Books. The Surface Books had way better battery life than any of my Razer Blades had.
Yeah.
And my Razer Blades drain pretty quick, even if I put it into like battery saver mode and, you know, and disengage the GPU and stuff like that. The battery still drains a lot quicker than my Surface Book. Like I could comfortably bring my Surface Book downstairs and work at the kitchen table for like a long period of time. But like with Razer, I just couldn't do that really.
Yeah.
It's just too much hassle. And also the charger on the Razer Blade it's a house brick. You could bludgeon someone to death with the Razer Blade. Charge brick.
Yeah,
it's huge.
So I don't think it's a B or a C, whatever it is you gave it, but I don't think it's an S either. I think it's a comfortable A. The only reason is because I think there are obvious improvements to be made. As Jez mentioned, that it could have at least a USB-A port, maybe an SD card reader for the creative professionals, which this is really aimed at, right? It is a creative professional sort of device. And I'm saying this as somebody who actually daily is a laptop studio. I do use one every day. This is my favorite laptop. That, and also I wish it had a high resolution display. I know you mentioned that, I mentioned that, but yes, the display on it is worse than the Surface Book, and it annoys me every time I look at it. It's just worse. It's even worse than the Pro 8. The Pro 8 display is gorgeous. The laptop studio is slightly less resolution, and I can totally see it. And also, I wish.
Whoa! Hold on. First of all, you're glossing over the fact that we did this for Pro A2. That's 128 hertz refresh.
Yeah, I mentioned that for both. Yeah, the refresh rate's the same, but the resolutions are different. The Pro 8's display is crisper. The Laptop Studios is slightly not crisp, but most people won't notice that. I know.
And you say it's not better, but here it is. So you leave out the important details. It's 100% sRGB. The Surface Book 3 was only 97% sRGB. Adobe RGB was 81% Adobe RGB, and the laptop books were 72%. So this is a more color accurate display. It's 120 hertz refresh. It's a much better display.
Yeah, but it's not as crisp, and I can see it. I can't see the color difference.
Part of the reason why it gets such good battery life, and my PC Mark was over 10 hours, is because that display. They said that they're trying to find a balance between a very good display for professionals, but also make sure that battery life is good, and that's just a compromise.
Yeah, a couple other things I wish I did do though. Go on, Jens.
I was gonna say you got to knock it a grade for the name. Man.
That's stupid.
You can't. No. I'm sorry. You can't give a laptop that has that many characters in its name. It's bad for SEO for one thing. It's bad for remembering.
Are you kidding? This is how. Jez, tell me you don't review laptops by telling me. I mean, have you ever reviewed a Lenovo laptop? The ThinkPad was a Lenovo ThinkPad.
Lenovo is terrible.
Hey, we are not grading Lenovo shit right now, Dan. We're grading Surface devices. I'm sorry, but it's got to get a point docked for the name. The name is it's too long. It's too confusing.
It's just called Laptop Studio. It's 2 words.
Nah, it's Surface Laptop Studio. No, you can't brand something Laptop Studio. It's Surface Laptop Studio. It's too long.
Razer Blade 14, Razer Blade 15, Razer Blade 17.
Yeah, the number's inconsequential. It's gonna get even. Imagine, right? We keep the Surface Laptop Studio branding, and then we end up going like Surface Laptop Studio 17-inch. It's gonna get silly, man. They should have just called it Surface Book 4 and not done with it.
All right, naming aside, I still think it's A, because I also wish there was a 16-inch model, and I also wish that they had one with maybe a 6-core processor. I think the 4-core processor in there is fine, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of people saw that and were like, oh, I wish they'd put a 6 or even 8-core
that's going to solve itself, though, right, when you go to 12th Gen 4.
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully. But that's what I'm saying, that's not this product, that's the next one.
Sure, well, they did have a choice there, but and I wouldn't be surprised if they do a 16-inch, but they probably want to see how well this one sells first before they commit to that. So,
can we agree on A?
Yes.
Yeah. Fine. Okay. let's put it up to A. Let me show you there because I've realised I'm not on the right screen. There we go. There it is. It's in the A grade. That was more controversial than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
All right. Up next is Surface Duo 2, another controversial one. I think. Listen, guys, I'm going to say it. I think this is A tier. I think it is A tier.
I was gonna give it B, but okay.
I'm using it as my daily. The cameras are better. It has NFC. It feels nice. The screens are better. 90 hertz. It's an upgrade over the Duo 1 in every regard. It even launched in a better state. I know it was still a bit buggy, but it was certainly in a much better state. And today it's perfectly fine. There are no issues with it. It does for what it's built for, it does that job really well, I think. Now, at this point, I think it's whether people actually agree with the dual screen aspect of it. I personally do. I think it's an A tier. But what are your thoughts, Dan?
I can be convinced of going to A. I think the problem is, one, it didn't launch the best state. Definitely better than our first one, so that's still an issue. But you're right, they've improved it significantly. We've seen a huge commitment from Microsoft in adding new features. You know, it's got way better pen support this time around. You got the pen cover, the rechargeable aspect. It's got NFC, which I never used NFC before. Now I'm using it all the time with this device. Like, yeah, I mean, and you're right. It's still my main phone. I got mine here. Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it's now an A, but we definitely have to leave the caveat that they had issues starting off. There's still issues with Android 11 not being, amazing for it compared to what 12L is supposed to do, in the future. But I like it a lot. So, yeah.
Hey, Jez, what do you think?
Now, I actually bought a Duo too, if you remember.
I do.
I bought one, and I sent it back within a week.
Right.
Because the camera is just unacceptably bad on that.
It's okay. It's not trash.
It's trash.
It's not.
When you've been using Galaxy phones for this long, it's just like I cannot accept a camera of this quality for this much money in current year. You know, and also the most glaring problem, the biggest issue, the lack of accent colors in the operating system. On the Galaxy Fold, you can skin the hell out of the operating system, make it any color you want. Surface Duo, they even pulled the developer tools to add accent colors that you can activate with dev mode. So yeah, for me it gets an F.
Okay. I'm still leaning on A. I love the Duo 2. I think it's great, and it doesn't. You know, I do take photos of it, and I've never other than maybe low light, it's a let down a little bit. But in normal lit scenarios, I've never.
I don't know.
complained.
I use it all the time, and it's kind of relative compared to my iPhone 12 mini. They're very comparable in terms of performance. So it's like, I don't know. I get the argument, oh, you're going to spend this amount of money on a device. You want the best cameras. But Jez talks about his cameras on his Fold 3. Jez, your cameras on a Fold 3 are trash compared to the S22 Ultra. So now what? You're spending all that money. Your cameras are last generation. They're not even close to the new one. So how can you use this argument?
I mean, it's true. It's true. Like I had an S. What did I have? I don't know. No, I can't remember what it's called. Note 20 Ultra, I think. I had a Note 20 Ultra coming into Galaxy Fold, and the first thing I noticed was, my God, this is such a downgrade in the camera, especially the telephoto. Like my Note, is it the Note 20 Ultra that I had? I think that's what I had. But I was using that phone I was like, man, this is what I always like, because the Lumia 1020 sort of gave you that zoom experience, right? But it was really slow processing the pictures. I actually had like Lumia 1020 nostalgia from using the Note 20 Ultra. But yeah, I won't lie that the Galaxy Fold 3 camera is not that great, but it performs much better in poor light conditions, which, as you can see, I have here.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think the point is all foldables currently have drawbacks to going with that design, and that may always be the case. We're seeing some improvements with Huawei devices and everything, that they kind of are able to deliver better cameras. And as that technology, I think, improves, but we are starting to hit a wall, I would say, too, in terms of camera quality and diminishing returns. I don't think most people care after a certain point. They're always going to get better, but it's like this stuff is getting really good now. And if you compare, even the Surface Duo 2 to a phone from 3 years ago, Surface Duo 2 is great compared to a phone 2 or 3 years ago. So it's kind of relative, but there are definitely trade-offs, I would say, with going to Fold, or to Fold or to Duo. But what you're using the Duo for is productivity, and that's its main purpose. It's not supposed to be like the camera phone, right? It's a productivity phone, and in that regard, I think it does its job very, very well.
Yeah, I think it's an A. I do think it's an A. So I think B is too harsh on it, because it does what it's supposed to do, right? What it was built for, it does it well. And yeah, the camera could be better, but if you compare it to the first Surface Duo, it improved on basically everything. Even like it launched with current specs as 888 Snapdragon. It had 8 gigs of RAM. It has 5G. It has NFC. You can use tap to pay. All of the criticisms from the first gen were answered and solved. And that, I think, is worth.
Does it have 5G?
It does have 5G. Yeah.
I think one of the issues I had with it as well when I had it was I wanted to use a WhatsApp video call on one screen, and then just Reddit or something on the other screen, and it made the phone really lag. But when I do that on my Galaxy Fold, there's no performance issues ever. I don't know if they've fixed that since, because I had it at launch, and I know they've done a lot of significant work to improve the operating system.
Much.
I had performance issues when I had it, and like side by side against the Galaxy Fold, because I bought both of them within the same sort of time frame. So I was like, I'll send one of these back, And I ended up choosing the Fold. I think ultimately, not so much because of the camera, but because of the multitasking performance. I just felt it was better on the Fold. But I think that was probably the result of software. And now, Samsung does a lot with their operating system.
Yeah. Right now, I think we're both curious if, like, you were to try it today, what your thoughts would be a Duo 2. I think some of your criticisms wouldn't have gone away, like the camera, but the camera itself has improved. It's faster now. It gets better low light performance. The behavior of it, everything about the device has improved. So I don't know if it'd be enough to reconvince you, but I think your decision made at that time. Yeah, I think your decision at that time that you made, it was probably accurate. I think that was, compared to the Fold 3. I don't know if it's that clean cut today. Now I'd be really kind of curious, but
Duo 3, I'll definitely pick up a Duo 3 because I'm on that foldables train now.
Yeah.
I'll never go back to a phone that has like a small screen that I can't do multiple things on at once. So I'll definitely on that Duo 3 train, and I'll see if it can pick up where I sort of felt like it failed a bit, but
yeah. Surface Laptop SE. Dan, you're the only one who's really touched one of these. Out of all the rankings, just real quick, what do you think it is?
I give it a B, I guess. Maybe an A. Like, again, it's a super quality, very budget laptop that has a high repairability, and they really designed it for teachers and schools. So I give it an A.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
it's
then
a great
lastly,
keyboard.
Yeah. Lastly, we have the Laptop Go 2, which just came out. This is a minor upgrade over the Laptop Go 1. It has an 11th gen chip instead of a 10th gen, and as a result, it has better graphics on the inside. There are a few other minor changes to it. I think Dan will run us through those.
Now I forget. I just wrote that review. I did. Let's see. Hold on. Now I got to bring it up.
It's a minor upgrade over the first Surface Go. It comes in a new color.
Right. There's a new color. I did list the actual differences. Bluetooth 5.1 instead of 5.0. No 64 gigabyte version. They got rid of that. They also got rid of the eMMC, so now it's just SSD. Of course, the processor, better graphics. They improved the 720p camera via a lot of software and a new processor. Better repairability for display and keyboard, new Sage colorway, secured core, and Windows 11 Home instead of Windows 10s. So definitely a minor upgrade. I wouldn't change what I gave it before. An A. I give it an A. Yeah, I'll keep it an A. It is iterative, but I think it feels even better today. So I don't know.
Right, I think that basically does it. We have ranked every Surface from 2012 up to today. The S tiers were the Laptop 4 and the Pro 8. Our A tiers were Pro 5, Laptop 1, Book 2, Go 1, Pro 6, Laptop 2, Pro X, Go 2, Laptop Go, Pro 7 Plus, Laptop Studio, Surface Duo 2, Laptop SE, and Laptop Go 2. Then B tier was a Surface RT, Surface Pro 3, Surface Pro 4, Surface Book, Surface Pro 7, and Surface Go 3. C tier was Surface Pro 1, Surface 2, Surface Studio 2, Laptop 3, Surface Duo, and then Book 3. And then D tier was Surface Pro 2 and the poor old Surface 3. I think that sounds about right? Certainly the Surface 3 is...
We need a bonus one, though.
What?
Because where do you rank the Surface table?
The Surface table it's a B if I had to put it on here, only because it kind of it sucks. It's not great. Listen, it's not great. It's not a consumer product.
It's a good score. If it sucks, don't give it a B.
Well, I mean, it sucks.
If I got a B grade at school, I was pretty happy.
Okay, you're right. Maybe it's a C. It's so old. Like the display technology it uses is just out of date now. It's just the touch technology they were using is slow as well. It's just a lot of... At the time, it would have been amazing, but today it's nothing to write home about. So that's where I'd put it. All right. Well, I think that just about does it. I guess before we sign off, I guess we can ask, what is our all-time favorite Surfaces? Jez, what was your number one Surface of all time?
Even though I don't use it personally, I think I have to say the Pro A. I use it here and there. Yeah, but it's my girlfriend's laptop really. But sometimes I'm just like, can I borrow that for a minute? It's the essential Surface Pro A. Like, if you sort of imagine where we were with the Surface RT, and then you imagine like, where will this device be in a decade? The Surface Pro A is literally it.
Yeah, good point.
So I think even though I don't use it personally, I'm really impressed with the Surface Pro 8, and I think it represents a good direction, for the technology and where they're going with it. So I'm going to say Pro 8.
Yeah. Dan, what is your all-time favorite Surface?
I would say Pro 8. Although Surface Duo 2 is right up there. I mean, if I had to, I'll pick my top 3 or 4: Pro 8, Pro X, Surface Duo 2, and Surface Laptop 4 13-inch Alcantara.
Nice. Mine is, I think, Surface Book 2, because I just remember loving that device so much when it was current at the time. Laptop, first gen laptop is also up there. I loved that device as well. And then the Duo 2, I think. I'm still using the Duo 2 and I love it to death. All right, well, thank you for tuning in, everybody. That was longer than I thought it was going to be, but I had fun. Hopefully you guys did too. Yes, subscribe to us. We'll release more videos as we do. Follow us on Twitter, and we will keep you updated on when our next streams are. So until then, we will see you next time.